The laughter started before the attorney finished reading the appraisal. $600? Marissa said. For that van? Tammy covered her mouth, but not quickly enough. A short laugh escaped between her fingers. Dylan Stevenson sat across from them at a polished conference table in Ely, Nevada, with both hands around a paper cup of cold coffee. His father had been dead since 2025. The black jacket Dylan had borrowed pinched beneath his arms, and the room smelled faintly of copier heat and lemon cleaner. The attorney, Mr. Bell, waited for the laughter to stop. Dylan looked at the document in front of him. There it was, in plain language. John Stevenson's broken 2001 survey van, together with everything inside it, passed to Dylan. So did the residue of the estate, meaning whatever remained after every named gift, bill, and expense had been handled. According to Tammy, nothing remained. According to the appraisal, the van was worth $600. Marissa received their father's house and Stevenson's survey yard at 412 Copperwash Road. Tammy received his savings. Both gifts came with ordinary costs and paperwork, but they were real assets. They had roofs, account balances, and buyers who would understand what they were looking at. Dylan received a vehicle that hadn't moved under its own power in 2 years. Mr. Bell cleared his throat. Would you like me to continue? Yes, Dylan said. Marissa leaned back in her chair. At 34, she was 6 years older than Dylan and had spent most of his life talking to him, as if he'd arrived late to an important meeting. She wasn't laughing now. She was studying him, waiting to see whether he understood how badly the division had gone for him. Mr. Bell read the remaining language. Tammy had been appointed executor. She would pay the final expenses, distribute the property, and close the estate. The van's contents transferred with the vehicle. Any estate property not specifically named passed to Dylan under the residuary clause. That's everything, Mr. Bell said. Dylan looked down at his father's signature. John had signed the will 7 months before his death. The letters were uneven, but the final stroke still rose sharply, the same way it did on repair receipts and birthday cards. Dylan remembered watching that hand guide a socket wrench into a place he couldn't see. Don't force it. Feel where it wants to sit. He set down the coffee. Did Dad say why? Dylan asked. Mr. Bell folded his copy of the will. He didn't discuss his reasons with me. Marissa gave a quiet sigh. Because Dylan liked the van. I asked him, Dylan said. And he answered. No, you answered for him. Tammy gathered the papers into a neat stack. At 62, she had John's square hands and his habit of pressing an index finger against a page before making a point. Your father knew you worked on vehicles, she said. He probably thought you could make use of it. The transmission was slipping before he parked it, Marissa said. The brakes are locked, the battery's dead, and something chewed the wiring. He gave Dylan a repair bill. Dylan didn't look at her. You had it inspected? I had the whole yard inspected. You've been busy. Somebody had to be. That landed harder than she expected. For a moment, Marissa looked away. During John's last month, Dylan had driven twice a week from his rented room near the edge of town. He brought groceries John didn't eat and fixed small things John claimed weren't broken. A leaking toilet valve, a loose handrail, the switch on the old kitchen fan. Marissa had arranged appointments, spoken with the insurance office, and kept a folder of every bill. Each of them had done what came naturally. Each had privately believed the other was doing the easier part. Tammy slid Dylan's copy of the will toward him. The residue sounds important, he said. It's standard wording, she replied. John didn't own anything else. You checked? I'm the executor. Of course I checked. It was a firm answer, but Dylan noticed the small pause before it. Tammy had checked the accounts, county tax statements, vehicle titles, and the records in John's desk. She hadn't searched every old survey file. She didn't believe she needed to. Marissa stood and buttoned her coat. I need the van out of the yard by Friday. Mr. Bell looked up. The vehicle belongs to him as soon as the distribution receipt is signed. That's why I'm telling him. Friday? Dylan said. I've got someone coming to look at the property. The whole yard? The office, workshop, storage sheds, and loft. All of it. You're selling Dad's business? There is no business. Dad stopped taking field jobs. The equipment's still there. Old equipment, old paper, old furniture. I'm not paying taxes and insurance so Dust can keep its address. Dylan felt his grip tighten around the edge of the table. Stevenson's survey yard had been part office, part workshop, and part family weather system. John could be calm at home and impossible there. He'd kept stakes sorted by color, sharpened pencils with a pocket knife, and expected every tool to return to the hook it came from. Dylan had spent more Saturdays in that yard than he'd spent anywhere else. He knew which loft window rattled in a west wind. He knew the sink needed a hard turn to stop dripping. He knew the van's rear doors only opened if someone lifted the left handle while pulling the right one. None of that gave him a claim to the property. "How long have you had a buyer?" he asked. "I don't have one yet, but someone's coming. A commercial broker?" Tammy glanced at Marissa. She hadn't known about Friday. Mr. Bell pushed a distribution receipt across the table. "This acknowledges that you received the van, its keys, its title, and the contents described in the will." Dylan read every line. His father had taught him that too. A person in a hurry usually wanted something from the person being hurried. There was nothing unusual in the receipt. No land, account, or secret promise waited between the lines. Just the van, its contents, and a clause saying Dylan accepted delivery. He signed. Marissa watched the pen move. She'd expected an argument, perhaps even a refusal. His quiet acceptance unsettled her more. Mr. Bell handed him a thin envelope. Inside were the title and 2 keys. One was the worn ignition key Dylan remembered. The other was smaller, with a square brass head and no label. "What's this one?" Dylan asked. Tammy looked at it. "Probably a cabinet key." "Which cabinet?" "I don't know. John kept keys for everything." Mr. Bell had no answer. His function was finished, and he made that clear by closing the estate folder and rising from his chair. They walked into a sharp February afternoon. Snow from the previous week had turned gray at the edges of the parking lot. Marissa headed toward her car without saying goodbye. Friday morning, she called over her shoulder. "After that, I'm having it hauled. Where? Wherever takes scrap." Dylan stood still. Tammy stopped beside him. "She doesn't mean half of what she says. She means that." "Yes," Tammy admitted. "She means that." Dylan put the keys into his pocket. "Did Dad ever talk to you about the residue?" "No." "The van?" "Only to complain that mice had gotten into it." "Why leave me everything inside?" Tammy rubbed her thumb across the corner of her folder. "Because the files weren't worth separating from the vehicle." She believed that, or wanted to. Closing probate had become the one task she understood. John was gone. The bills could be paid, the gifts transferred, and the forms filed. Every open question felt like another loose end he'd left for her to tie. "If you find personal records," she said, "call me. Some of the field books may belong with the yard. The will says the contents are mine." "I know what it says." "Then why would they belong with Marissa's property?" I said, "May. Don't make this difficult before we know what's there." Dylan looked at the attorney's envelope in his hand. "I'll tell you if I find something that affects the estate." Tammy's mouth tightened. It wasn't the promise she wanted, but it was one she could hold him to. "All right," she said. "Friday is unreasonable. I'll tell her you need the weekend." "I don't. You have a tow truck? I'll figure it out." That afternoon, Dylan drove to Stevenson's survey yard. The chain across the entrance hung loose from one post. Marissa's car was parked beside the office, its rear hatch open. She was carrying banker's boxes from the building and setting them on the gravel. The yard occupied a long strip between Copperwash Road and a dry rise covered in rabbit brush. A low metal workshop stood at the back. The office sat nearer the gate, with John's fading blue survey marker painted beside the door. Above the workshop was a loft with 2 narrow windows. One pane had been covered with plywood since a windstorm. The van stood along the east fence. Sun and dust had taken most of the shine from its white paint. Stevenson Land. Surveying remained visible on one side, though several blue letters had peeled at the edges. The front tires were soft. A brown water stain ran below the windshield. One mirror hung at an angle. Dylan walked toward it slowly. Marissa set down another box. "It looks worse up close." He tried the driver's door. The old ignition key opened it. A dry smell came out. Paper, dust, mouse nests, and vinyl warmed by the sun. The seat had split along one seam. John's dented travel mug remained in the cup holder. A faded orange vest lay folded behind the passenger seat. Dylan put one foot on the step but didn't climb in. The last time he'd ridden in that seat, John had complained for 20 miles about a radio host and then stopped at a gas station to buy Dylan coffee. He'd taken his without sugar, forgotten that Dylan used cream, and gone back inside to get it. That was John. Care often arrived disguised as an inconvenience. Marissa came up behind him. "Take whatever you want from the cab," she said. "The rest is probably moldy. The rest came with it." "I know." "Do you?" She crossed her arms. "Don't start." Dylan climbed inside. He turned the ignition. Nothing happened. Not a click, not a weak light on the dash. He pulled the hood release. It moved without resistance. "Cable's broken," he said. "Add it to the list." He ignored her and went around the front. He reached through the grill, found the release lever by touch, and pressed it with the end of the ignition key. The hood lifted half an inch. That tiny movement felt better than it should have. Dylan raised the hood and propped it open. The battery terminals were white with corrosion. Several wires near the firewall had been stripped bare. Marissa had been right about the rodents. "You can still call the scrapyard," she said. "No. What are you going to do with it? Move it. And after that, I don't know yet." For once, she had no quick answer. She returned to the office and carried out another box. Dylan opened the side door. Metal shelving lined one wall. Survey poles, old safety cones, a tripod, plastic cases, and bundles of wooden stakes filled most of the space. Along the other wall stood a shallow map cabinet built into a steel workbench. Its wide drawers had recessed handles and typed labels beneath cloudy plastic strips. County roads, utility plans, copper wash. The cabinet looked ordinary. John had opened those drawers hundreds of times with a pencil tucked behind one ear. Dylan pulled the copper wash handle. It moved less than an inch and stopped. He tried the little brass key from the attorney's envelope. It fit the lock beneath the workbench, but it wouldn't turn. "Of course," he said. He leaned closer. Dust packed the lock. A dark line of rust showed beneath the drawer front. His phone rang. It was Sophia Keller. She didn't begin with condolences. She had already given them at the funeral, quietly and without trying to improve the moment. "How bad is it?" she asked. Dylan looked through the open side door at the flat tires. "You knew I was here? Marissa called me. She wants to know whether the old field equipment adds value to the yard." "What did you tell her?" "That depends on whether she expects a surveyor to buy 20 years of dust." Despite himself, Dylan smiled. Sophia had worked beside John for nearly 7 years before opening her own small practice. She knew the van, the files, and John's habit of correcting everyone's measurements before checking his own. "I need to move it," Dylan said. "When?" "Before Friday. That's 2 days." "I noticed." There was a pause. Sophia had appointments waiting and a stack of active jobs. She also needed access to John's older field data because several boundary projects in her files connected to work he had done. Helping Dylan wasn't charity. It was useful, complicated, and likely to irritate Marissa. "I can borrow a trailer tonight," she said. "The workshop beside my office has space. The brakes are seized." "I know." "How?" "Your father tried to make me help free them last spring. We got one wheel loose before he decided lunch was more urgent." Dylan rested his hand on the cabinet. "Why didn't he finish?" "He said he'd get to it." John had said that about the loft window, the leaking workshop sink, and the van's wiring. Then time had finished first. Sophia spoke again. "I'll bring a winch and wheel dollies. We won't make it run tonight, but we can get it through my door." Dylan looked toward the office. Marissa was watching from the steps. "Bring them," he said. Sophia arrived after sunset in a pickup pulling a flatbed trailer. The temperature dropped fast, and their breath showed beneath the yard light. One rear wheel refused to turn. Dylan crawled underneath with a flashlight while Sophia worked the jack. "You've got 10 minutes before I lose feeling in my fingers," she said. "You wore the thin gloves. I believed the forecast. That was your first mistake." They removed the wheel and backed off the frozen adjuster through the access slot. Rust fell into Dylan's sleeve. The drum resisted, shifted, then turned with a rough scrape. Sophia spun it once by hand. "There," she said. "It still hates us, but it moves." Marissa stood near the office door with her coat pulled tight. She'd expected the van to remain where it was, forcing her to take control. Instead, she watched Dylan guide it onto the trailer, one slow foot at a time. When the tires finally crossed the workshop threshold at Sophia's place, it was almost midnight. Dylan stepped down from the trailer, cold, filthy, and more awake than he'd felt since the funeral. The van was still broken. The cabinet was still jammed. He still had no idea why John had left him a worthless residue and an unlabeled key. But the van was out of Marissa's yard. It was under a roof. Dylan switched on the workshop lights, placed the brass key beside his tools, and said, We start with the brakes. Sophia took off one glove with her teeth and checked the time. We start after sleep, she said. You're holding that wrench like it insulted your mother. I'm fine. You drove a dead van onto my floor at midnight. You drove the truck, and I'd like to continue making good decisions. She showed him the small room behind her office. There was a folding cot, a clean blanket, and a row of file boxes against one wall. Dylan had slept in worse places, though he couldn't remember ever being so tired while standing still. Sophia locked the workshop. Before leaving, she pointed toward the van. One condition. I knew there'd be one. I get access to the field records that connect to my active jobs. If they're in the van, if they're in the yard, I'll need Marissa's permission. I'm not asking you to steal them. I didn't think you were. You were thinking something. I was thinking you helped because of Dad. I did. I also helped because some of his records are the only clean trail through 30 years of boundary work. Both things can be true. That sounded like something John would have argued with for 10 minutes before admitting she was right. Dylan sat on the cot and removed his boots. Sophia turned off the office light. Sleep, she said. We'll disagree properly in the morning. He woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of a metal door rolling upward. The workshop looked different in daylight. Sophia rented one end of a long block building behind a tire store. Her office occupied the front. The rear held a workbench, 2 steel shelves, and enough open floor for the van if nobody needed to walk comfortably around it. She'd already put the coffee on the bench. Dylan picked up the cup marked with a strip of blue tape. That one's yours, she said. Mine has enough sugar to preserve fruit. He drank. She had remembered the cream. The van's condition became clearer as they worked. The left rear brake was seized worse than the right. One front hose showed deep cracks. The master cylinder had leaked down the booster. Mice had carried insulation into the airbox and chewed through a bundle of wires behind the dashboard. Dylan wrote each problem on a piece of cardboard. Sophia looked over his shoulder. You always make the list before you know the prices. It's easier to be brave without prices. That's not bravery. It gets the hood open. He removed the battery and cleaned the tray. Rust had eaten through one corner, though the metal beneath it was still sound. He tapped it with a screwdriver and listened. Sophia was sorting equipment in the rear. Your father used to do that. What? Hit metal and wait for it to confess. He said rust sounds different. He also said he could hear a bad bearing from across a parking lot. He could. He guessed correctly half the time and remembered only those times. Dylan smiled, then looked away before the smile became something else. Sophia pulled out 2 broken range poles, an empty equipment case, and a plastic crate of field books swollen by moisture. She opened one carefully. These are ordinary job logs, she said. Mostly old county work. Useful, some of them. Not $18,000 useful. Dylan looked up. Where did you get that number? I called a parts supplier while you were asleep. You priced everything? Brakes, wiring, tires, fuel system, glass seal, labor. We can't do ourselves, and enough extra for whatever's hiding. We can do most of the labor. You can. I have clients, so do I. Dylan sometimes repaired utility trucks and mining equipment on the contract. The work paid well when it came steadily. It hadn't come steadily that winter. Sophia pointed at the cardboard. You'll lose paid days. That counts. He added the estimate at the bottom of the list. $18,000. That was most of his savings. The amount had taken him 4 years to build and could disappear into a vehicle worth $600. He folded the cardboard and put it in his pocket. You don't have to decide today, Sophia said. Marissa made Friday the deadline. The van's gone. Her deadline is over. Dylan wasn't accustomed to hearing one of Marissa's demands described as finished. In their family, a demand usually changed shape and returned. They moved to the map cabinet. The little brass key entered the lock, but the cylinder still refused to turn. Dylan sprayed it, waited, then worked the key gently in both directions. On the 4th try, the lock moved. A bar released inside the cabinet with a dull knock. Sophia gripped the copper wash drawer and pulled. It opened the same inch as before, then stopped. Rust? Dylan asked. She crouched beside him. No. Listen. She pushed the drawer closed. A small click came from behind the workbench. Powered lock rail, she said. John had it installed after a drawer opened while he was driving. I remember that. Maps all over the highway. He blamed the road. He always blamed the road. They found a service panel below the workbench. The brass key opened that too. Inside was a compact fuse board connected to the damaged wiring running forward. 2 fuses had blown. Corrosion covered the main terminal. Dylan traced the wires with his finger. "The cabinet isn't jammed," he said. "It's still locked. That's good. It needs the electrical system. That's less good." The lock turning was a small result, but it changed the problem. The drawers hadn't rusted shut. Whatever John had stored inside remained behind an ordinary mechanism that could be repaired. Sophia leaned into the van and looked at the cabinet labels. "He wouldn't let me move these files." "When?" "When we tried to free the brakes. I told him papers shouldn't sit in a leaking van. He said the records belonged with the vehicle. All of them?" He didn't explain. "Did he say anything about me?" "No." The answer disappointed Dylan, though he had no right to expect another one. Sophia noticed. He didn't say much about anybody while he was working. He talked about Marissa. He complained about Marissa. That counted as talking. "He complained about you, too." Dylan looked over. "He said you tightened everything as if it might escape." "That's not a complaint. It was when he needed the bolt removed." His phone rang on the workbench. Marissa. He watched it for 2 rings before answering. "What's wrong?" he said. "Why does something have to be wrong?" "You called before 9. The sink in the workshop is leaking again." "Turn the valve off." "I did. It's still dripping." "Then you turned the wrong valve." There was silence. "I've got the broker coming tomorrow," she said. "Can you take a look?" Dylan looked at the van. Sophia had heard enough to understand. "I'm working." "On what?" "My van. You're spending time fixing that while water runs into the cabinet under my sink?" The word "my" was quiet. That made it sharper. "You can call a plumber. You know the building. So does every plumber in Ely. They have pipes in other buildings too." Marissa lowered her voice. "I'm not asking for a major favor. Dad always had you handle this stuff." There it was, the family role he knew how to perform. Dylan fixed what broke. Marissa handled what mattered. Tammy handled what was official. John had rarely asked Dylan to sit down and discuss the future of the yard, but he'd called whenever a truck failed, a door sagged, or a heater made the wrong sound. Dylan had mistaken being needed for being included. The mistake wasn't entirely theirs. "I'll come at lunch," he said. Sophia waited until he ended the call. "You know she can hire someone." "I know." "Then why are you going?" "Because a leak can ruin the cabinet she plans to sell. It doesn't deserve water damage." Sophia handed him a flashlight. "Neither does the van." At noon, they drove to the yard together. Sophia needed to see which field books remained in the office, and Dylan wasn't willing to ask Marissa for her twice. Marissa met them outside with a handwritten list. "The sink's first," she said. "Then the loft window. The plywood is loose again. There's also a light out over the rear door." Dylan read the list. "You said the sink." "I noticed the rest this morning." Sophia glanced at him, but said nothing. Inside the workshop, water had collected in a roasting pan beneath the drain pipe. Dylan opened the cabinet. The supply valves were dry. "It's not the faucet," he said. "The drain seal failed. Can you fix it?" "Yes." He found plumber's putty in John's old supply cupboard. The lid was stuck. He tapped it against the counter, opened it, and smelled the mineral oil his father used to keep the putty soft. Marissa stood in the doorway while he removed the drain. "Did you get the van moved without damage?" Yes." "Where is it?" "At Sophia's workshop." Marissa looked toward the office where Sophia was examining file drawers. "For how long?" "We haven't decided. I need those records kept together. The records in the van came with the van. I mean the yard records. Then talk to Sophia. She knows what she needs." Marissa folded the repair list in half. "You're being difficult about everything. I'm fixing your sink." "You know what I mean." He did. Marissa wanted him to make the sale easier, accept what he'd been given, and remain available enough that the family still felt intact. Dylan wanted her to look at him once and see someone who belonged in the decisions, not someone called after the decisions caused a practical problem. He pressed new putty around the drain and tightened the fitting. "Run the water," he said. Marissa turned on the faucet. No drops fell into the pan. "That should hold," Dylan said. "Thank you." It was sincere, which made refusing the rest harder. Sophia entered with 3 field books in her hands. "These cover 2 jobs I'm working near Murray Street," she said. "I'd like to scan the relevant pages and return them. Are they valuable? Marissa asked. They're useful. Then they stay with the yard. Paper staying in a locked drawer helps nobody. A buyer may want the archive. A buyer may throw it away. Marissa's expression changed. That possibility had occurred to her, but she hadn't wanted it spoken aloud. Tammy arrived while they were still standing there. She carried an inventory form on a clipboard and looked from Sophia's field books to Dylan's wet hands. I thought the van was removed, she said. It is, Marissa replied. He came back for the sink. Tammy nodded, as if that restored the expected order. She handed Dylan the clipboard. I need you to identify which tools in the workshop were John's and which were kept in the van. I can do that later. Probate can't close until the inventory is complete. You said everything was checked. The assets were checked. I still need to separate the gifts. Dylan took the clipboard. Several rows were blank. You listed the van contents as assorted equipment. That's what they are. You want a detailed list now? Marissa wants the yard cleared. We need to know what goes with you. He nearly agreed. Then he saw the loft window repair on Marissa's folded paper, the field books Sophia couldn't use without permission, and the water stain on his sleeve. Everyone had a task for him. None of them had asked what repairing the van would cost, or whether he had somewhere permanent to keep it. He handed the clipboard back. I'll inventory the van because it's mine, he said. You can inventory the workshop. Tammy blinked. You know the equipment better. Marissa owns it. She can hire someone. Marissa held out her list. What about the window? The sink was causing damage. The window can wait for your broker. He washed his hands, dried them on a shop rag, and followed Sophia outside. At her workshop, he unfolded the cardboard estimate and placed it beside the open service panel. $18,000 still looked reckless. The corroded terminals still needed replacing. The drawers still wouldn't open. Sophia set the borrowed field books on her desk. Marissa had allowed her 1 hour to scan them at the yard, under supervision. It wasn't trust, but it was access. Dylan picked up a screwdriver. I kept thinking if I helped her sell the place, she'd treat me like I had a say in it. Sophia switched on the bench lamp. Would she? No. He removed the first damaged wire from the cabinet fuse board and labeled it before reaching for the next. The next one came free with a soft snap. Dylan marked both ends with masking tape. Sophia sat at her desk in the front office, turning field book pages beneath a scanner. Every few minutes, the machine dragged in another sheet of light. You're making labels for wires you plan to replace, she said. I'm making labels so I replace the right wires. Your father used colors. My father used whatever tape was closest. He'd call that a system. He called every habit a system. Sophia saved another scan and carried the field book back to the workshop. Marissa had counted the pages before letting it leave the yard. She'd also photographed the book's worn cover, as if Sophia might replace it with a convincing copy from a store that sold old survey records. I have to return these by 5, Sophia said. She wants to lock them up before she leaves, then finish yours. I'll handle this. What are you trying to make it do? Release the cabinet rail, through damaged wiring, through a fuse test lead. That wasn't an answer to my question. Dylan turned on the bench light and pointed into the service panel. The wires from the fuse board disappeared behind the wall, then passed beneath the floor toward the front electrical system. Most vehicle cabinets used a simple mechanical latch. John's had a lock rail that secured every flat drawer whenever the engine was running. The system had made sense when the van moved. It made less sense now that a damaged wire anywhere in the circuit could keep the cabinet shut. If I feed the solenoid here, Dylan said, we'll know whether the lock itself works. And if the short is inside the cabinet, the fuse blows. What if the solenoid pulls halfway and jams harder? Then I get to tell you that you were right. Sophia considered that. Use the smaller fuse. I was going to. You picked up the larger one. I was putting it away. She gave him a look and returned to the scanner. Dylan found the proper fuse. He could have forced the lock rail with a pry bar. The cabinet was only sheet steel, but the drawers were shallow, and their contents lay close beneath the top panel. One bent edge could tear every map inside. He connected a spare battery to the test lead. Nothing smoked. That was the first good sign. When he touched power to the terminal, something moved behind the drawers. It wasn't the clean release Sophia had hoped to hear. The rail lifted, struck metal, and dropped again. She came back from the office. Do it once more. Dylan touched the lead to the terminal. The same lift. The same sharp knock. The solenoid works, he said. The rail doesn't. Something's holding it. They removed the lower service cover. The rail ran vertically behind the drawer faces, protected by a narrow steel channel. Dylan could see the bottom end, but not the point where it caught. Sophia crouched beside him. Can you reach it? Not without removing the cabinet, and removing the cabinet means taking out the workbench, the shelving, and half the wall panel. You make it sound restful. There may be another interlock. Where? Up front. John could have tied it to the ignition or parking brake. Sophia stood. Then the van's wiring isn't a separate repair. No, the cabinet depended on the damaged electrical system. Restoring access to John's papers now meant repairing the circuit properly, or dismantling the interior around it. Dylan disconnected the test battery. His deliberate move had worked. The lock wasn't dead, and the drawer wasn't sealed by rust. But knowing that made the larger repair harder to avoid. He started removing loose items so he could reach the wiring channel. Each piece went onto the inventory sheet Tammy had requested. 2 tripods, 4 range poles, a box of flagging tape, 3 safety vests, a hand level in a cracked leather case, a portable radio that smelled as if its batteries had leaked years ago. Sophia returned to her scanning. Dylan lifted the rubber mat beneath the workbench. A drift of dust and dry rabbit brush had collected along the wall. He swept it into a pan, then wiped down the cabinet with a damp cloth. Above the wide drawers was a narrow metal tray he'd assumed was part of the cabinet frame. A small recessed pull appeared after he cleaned away the dirt. The brass key wasn't needed. The tray slid open by hand. Inside stood a row of index cards held upright by a bent divider. They were yellowed at the edges and arranged by the same typed codes used on the drawer labels. Dylan carried the tray to the bench. Sophia. She finished the page she was scanning before coming back. What? Did John keep a separate card index? She looked at the tray. Years ago? I thought he threw it out when we made the digital job list. The first cards covered county roads. Each showed a short file code in the upper corner, a job name, a date, and 1 or 2 notes in John's compact handwriting. Dylan kept his hands clean and turned them one at a time. Why use cards if he had drawer labels? The labels tell you the area. The cards tell you what's in the area. Then we should know what's inside without opening it. If he kept the cards current, did he? Sophia gave him a patient look. This is the man who stored tax receipts in a coffee tin. They reached the cards marked for copper wash. The first read CW-1. Beneath it, John had written county access compilation and a reference to the familiar road map used on older surveys in that part of White Pine County. Sophia touched the corner. I know this one. It shows the county road and the older parcel lines. He carried a copy whenever we worked east of town. Dylan turned the card over. Nothing was written on the back. The next divider was blank. He checked behind it. A second card had slipped flat against the bottom of the tray. Only one line appeared on its face. CW-2. The code had been written in pencil and gone over once in blue ink. A small diagonal mark crossed the upper corner. No job name followed it. No date. No drawer number. The rest of the card was empty. Dylan placed it beside CW-1. What does the corner mark mean? He asked. Sophia leaned closer. I'm not sure. You've seen it before. I've seen marks like it. John used them when a field note changed something on the office copy. Changed what? Anything. A bearing, a monument description, the spelling of a name. It wasn't one fixed meaning. So this says there was a second copper wash record. It says he made a second index card. That's not the same thing? Not until we find the record. Dylan checked every card behind it. The sequence moved on to another area. There was no further reference to CW-2. Sophia opened her laptop and searched the digital job index. Copperwash produced several survey jobs, but none carried that code. CW-1 appeared once beside the county access map. CW-2 didn't appear at all. Maybe he started the card and never finished it, she said. Would he ink the code before he had a record? He might. Would he mark the corner? Sophia didn't answer immediately. She disliked giving certainty where she had none. John had valued that about her until it delayed an answer he wanted. No, she said at last. That part is odd. Dylan looked toward the locked copper wash drawer. The second code didn't prove there was another map inside. It didn't say what the record covered or whether it mattered now. But the cabinet had one known copper wash map, one index card for that map, and a second card for something absent from every list they could search. He photographed the card beside CW1, then returned both to the tray in the same order. Tammy needs a copy, Sophia said. Why? Because you promised to tell her if you found something that affected the estate. We don't know that it does. We don't know that it doesn't. She'll tell Marissa. Probably. And Marissa will want the cabinet. It came with the van. That hasn't stopped her wanting things so far. Dylan slid the tray closed. I'll tell Tammy when I know what the card refers to. Sophia held his gaze. That's not hiding estate property, he said. It's an unlabeled index card. I didn't say it was property. You were about to. I was about to say that waiting has a cost. If Tammy learns about it from someone else, she'll think you hid it. Who else knows? I do. The answer wasn't a threat. That made it more useful. Dylan took out his phone and called Tammy. She answered from the yard, where she was checking serial numbers against the inventory. Voices and a closing cabinet sounded behind her. I found an index card in the van, Dylan said. What kind? One of Dad's file cards. It says CW-2. Is that a survey number? I don't know yet. What does Sophia say? That it may refer to a second copper wash record. May? The card's incomplete. Tammy became quiet. Have you seen that code? Dylan asked. No. Did Dad ever ask you to move copper wash files? No. Why would he ask me? You helped him at the yard. I helped with billing when your mother was alive. I didn't handle field records. Dylan heard the defensive note and left it alone. The drawer is still locked, he said. I'm repairing the electrical system. Don't damage anything. I'm trying not to. If there's another survey, it may belong with the business records. The cabinet and contents are mine. I understand that. I'm saying a client record can carry obligations. What obligations? Privacy, retention? I don't know. Ask Sophia. Sophia had heard. She nodded once. On that point, Tammy wasn't wrong. I'll call when we know more, Dylan said. Call before you remove or copy anything. Tammy ended the call. Dylan put down the phone. You wanted her told, he said. I didn't say you'd enjoy it. Sophia checked the time and gathered the field books. She needed to return them to the yard, then drive south for an afternoon boundary check. The van occupied space where she normally loaded equipment for those jobs. You can keep it here through next week, she said. After that, I need the floor. That wasn't the deal last night. Last night's deal was to get it through the door. It's through the door. I need more than a week, then get it rolling enough to move outside. The cabinet wiring runs through the dash. I know. The brake parts won't arrive until Tuesday. I know that too. You've thought about this. I run a business, Dylan. The van can't become the business because your father left it in pieces. He folded the inventory sheet and put it on the workbench. What if CW2 connects to one of your jobs? Then I'll help trace it. If it doesn't, I'll still help enough to know what John filed. But I can't cancel paying work while you decide whether every loose screw is a message. The words hurt because they touched something he'd been doing without admitting it. He had saved John's travel mug, his stiff orange vest, even the cracked radio. Each item had felt like a small instruction he wasn't clever enough to understand. Dylan picked up the radio and placed it in a box marked Personal Effects. This isn't about every screw, he said. No, it's about one card. That's better. Sophia left with the field books. Dylan stayed beside the open side door. A repair estimate sat in his pocket. A deadline now sat on Sophia's floor. Tammy knew about the unexplained code and expected another call. Whatever CW2 represented might also carry duties to someone whose name they hadn't found. He had planned to make the van move because it was the only part of John's working life the family had handed him. Now, movement wasn't enough. Dylan opened the wiring diagram, found the circuit running from the ignition to the cabinet interlock, and circled it in pencil. Then he wrote CW-2 at the top of a clean sheet and began a list of every place the missing record could be. The first place on the list was the crate of swollen field books. Most had job numbers on their covers. A few had only months and years. Dylan arranged them on the workbench without opening any page that resisted. Damp paper could tear at the binding with almost no warning. Sophia returned before 8, carrying a bag of brake parts and the 3 books Marissa had allowed her to scan. She counted the pages again, she said. Did you lose any? Several hundred. I replaced them with recipes. She placed the books on Dylan's bench. Marissa wants these back before the broker arrives. Leave them here for 10 minutes. They don't belong to you. I want to check the correction marks. Sophia understood. She opened her laptop and brought up the photographs of CW2 and CW1. Then they searched the 3 field books page by page. John's marks appeared everywhere. Check marks, circles, question marks with heavy dots. None matched the short diagonal line through the corner of the CW2 card. Dylan returned the books to her. "You should take them back. You said 10 minutes. It's been 9. I'll use the extra minute to admire your restraint." After she left, he continued with the books from the van. One had fused shut along the bottom edge. Another contained nothing but elevation notes for a drainage project west of town. A third was full of phone numbers, half of them crossed out. He found the diagonal mark in the 4th book. It appeared beside a page headed Copper Wash. The cover showed a year from a decade earlier. John had recorded an ordinary field visit with weather, mileage, and equipment numbers. Near the bottom, he had written that runoff had moved visible stakes along the wash. The original line needed checking. The diagonal mark crossed the upper corner, exactly as it crossed the CW2 card. Dylan photographed the page without moving the book from the bench. Sophia returned 20 minutes later. "The broker's early," she said. "Marissa's walking him through the loft like she built it herself." Dylan turned the field book toward her. Sophia set down her keys. "I remember this day. You were there? For the first visit. The storm came through 2 nights before. Water carried brush across the track, and several stakes were lying down." "What kind of stakes?" "Wooden boundary stakes, visible markers, not proof by themselves." "What did Dad do?" "He measured from the references we had and told me not to replace anything yet." "Why not?" "Because he didn't trust where the wash left them." She read the rest of the page. There was no ownership note, no parcel description, no name that explained why John had returned. The final line said only that he would correct the field record after checking the original line. "Did you go back with him?" Dylan asked. "No, I had another job." "Did he tell you what he found?" "He told me the office copy needed changing." "Which office copy?" "I assumed he meant CW1. Dylan placed the index card photograph beside the field book page. Sophia looked between the 2 marks. "Maybe I assumed wrong. Would he make a second record instead of changing the first? If the first one showed county information and he didn't want his field correction confused with it, yes. Then CW2 was real. It was probably real. You've moved from, maybe, I've moved 1 word. It was enough." The card hadn't been an abandoned label. John had used the same mark on a completed field note about a correction. He'd gone back after runoff moved the stakes, then changed an office record Sophia never saw. Dylan checked the rest of the book. 2 pages had been removed cleanly near the binding. The page numbers continued without a gap, because John numbered field entries, not sheets. "Were those missing when you used it?" Dylan asked. "I don't know. Could they be the correction? They could be grocery lists. Don't turn every absence into evidence." He looked at the cut edge. "They weren't torn out." "No, he used a knife." That was how John removed pages he wanted to file flat. He slipped a piece of cardboard beneath the sheet, cut close to the binding, then pressed the page beneath a stack of equipment manuals until it stopped curling. Sophia knew the habit. Dylan did too. "If those pages were filed," Dylan said, "they may be in the drawer. They may. And the lock rail needs the van circuit." "Yes." He shut the field book carefully. Sophia had brought a written estimate from the parts supplier. Tires, brake assemblies, hoses, a master cylinder, wiring, battery, windshield seal, and fuel system work brought the likely cost to $18,000 once outside labor was included. The number hadn't improved overnight. "I can't promise this record matters," she said. "I know. It may document a line that was corrected somewhere else years ago. I know. You'll still own a van worth less than the repairs. I know that too. Then what are you deciding?" Dylan looked at the cabinet. Until that morning, repairing it had been a way to keep something John had touched. That reason still mattered, but it wasn't enough to empty a savings account. Now the cabinet held a record John had made after a physical problem changed what people could see on the ground. It might affect someone who still relied on that line. Leaving it trapped in a dead vehicle no longer felt like protecting John's memory. It felt like refusing his unfinished work. "I'm deciding whether I can repair it in stages," Dylan said. Sophia nodded toward the brake parts. "Those get it safe enough to move. The wiring gets us into the cabinet. Tires and fuel come after. Outside labor? You'll need someone to rebuild the damaged harness if your repair doesn't test clean. My repair will test clean. That confidence should be taxed. Dylan called the supplier and ordered the brake system, battery, tires, and wiring materials. The deposit left his account while he stood beside the van. He stared at the new balance for a few seconds. There was still enough to pay rent and ordinary bills. There was no longer enough to pretend the repair could be abandoned without consequence. Sophia began removing the left rear drum. "You can still return some of it," she said. "Not after installation. That's why I told you now." They worked through the morning. Dylan replaced the corroded cabinet terminal, then followed the interlock wire forward. Beneath the dashboard, the insulation had been eaten away in several places. One damaged section had melted against the metal support. He separated the wires and tested each branch. The cabinet circuit held continuity until it passed through a small relay connected to the parking brake. John's system required the brake to be set, and the ignition switched to accessory before the drawer rail released. It prevented anyone from opening the cabinet while the van moved. Dylan bypassed nothing. He cleaned the relay socket, replaced the damaged section, and built the circuit back the way John had intended. By late afternoon, the new battery powered the interior lights. A weak yellow bulb came on above the rear doors. Sophia stood inside the van, looking at dust that had been hidden in darkness for years. "That's almost disappointing," she said. "I expected music. The radio has battery acid in it." Then, no music. Dylan turned the ignition to accessory and set the parking brake. The cabinet solenoid pulled. This time, the rail rose farther before striking the obstruction. One drawer handle moved a fraction more than before, then stopped. The electrical repair had worked. The mechanical rail was still caught. Sophia placed her fingers against the drawer face while Dylan powered the circuit again. "It's binding near the top," she said. "Can you feel which drawer? Copper wash or the one above it?" They removed the trim around the cabinet. The top edge remained hidden beneath the workbench, but Dylan could now see a slight twist in the cabinet frame. At some point, something heavy had struck the workbench and pushed one corner backward. "The frame's bent," he said. "Can we straighten it?" "Not safely while the drawers are loaded." "Can we unload the drawers?" "Not while they're locked." Sophia sat back on her heels. "That's a very John problem. A system built to protect the records is keeping us from protecting the records." He'd insist it was working. The shop phone rang in the front office. Sophia ignored it once. It rang again. She went to answer, then called back. "It's for you." "Nobody has this number. This person does." Dylan wiped his hands and took the receiver. "Dylan Stevenson?" "Yes." "My name is Landon Castillo. I manage the solar project east of Copper Wash." Dylan knew the project by the trucks he'd seen on the highway, but little else. "How did you find me?" "I called Stevenson's survey yard. Your sister said the old van records went to you." Dylan looked through the office window. Sophia had stopped working. "What records are you looking for?" he asked. "Anything John kept on Copper Wash Road and the land south of it. He reviewed an early service road plan for us." "When?" "Last year, informally. We met at the site." "What did he say?" "That our proposed route didn't match what he trusted on the ground. He told me not to treat the visible road as the whole answer." Dylan picked up a pencil. "Did he explain?" "He said he needed to check his field copy. I called again later, but he wasn't well enough to meet." Landon's voice was controlled, though he was choosing each word quickly. He had already repeated this explanation to people who wanted a simpler answer. "Why do you need it now?" Dylan asked. "Our route review came back this morning. We have 30 days to show legal access for the preferred service road. If we can't, we abandon that route and redesign. What does that have to do with Dad's survey?" "I don't know yet. That's why I'm calling." Dylan wrote 30 days at the top of the wiring diagram. "I found a reference to a second Copper Wash field record," he said. "I haven't found the record. Can I see the reference?" "Not yet." Landon paused. "I'm not asking you to hand over private files," he said. "But if John flagged a problem that affects our route, I need to understand it before the deadline. Who else knows you called?" "My project team. Your sister knows I asked for the van records." Dylan closed his eyes briefly. Marissa had sent Landon to him, but she would already be wondering why a solar manager cared about papers inside a vehicle she'd valued as scrap. "I'll meet you tomorrow," Dylan said. "Where?" "Sophia Keller's workshop. 10 in the morning." After the call, he told Sophia what Landon had said. She read the field note again. "Visible road isn't legal access," she said. "Those aren't the same question." What question was Dad checking? We need the second record. His cell phone rang almost immediately. Marissa's name appeared on the screen. Dylan answered. What does the solar project want? She asked. Copper wash records. Those are business files. The ones in the van came to me. If they affect property or a client, you don't get to keep them private because Dad put them in your broken vehicle. I'm not keeping anything private. I'm finding out what exists. I want all the copper wash files brought back to the yard. No. The word came more easily than it had beside the leaking sink. Marissa went silent. Dylan looked at the cabinet rail, the new parts on Sophia's floor, and the deadline written across his diagram. Landon's meeting us here tomorrow, he said. You can come, but nothing leaves the van until we know what Dad was correcting. Marissa's answer came after a long breath. I'll be there, she said. And Tammy should be there too. You don't need the executor to look at a road plan. We don't know what we need. That's the problem. She ended the call. The next morning, Landon arrived 10 minutes early. He drove a dusty company pickup and carried a cardboard tube beneath one arm. He wore work boots, a clean button shirt, and the tired expression of a man whose schedule depended on answers other people had promised months ago. Sophia introduced herself and checked his business card before letting him spread anything across her desk. Marissa arrived while he was unrolling the project plan. Tammy followed in her own car with the estate clipboard. Dylan had cleared one end of the workbench. Landon placed the plan there and held down its corners with brake drums. This is our preferred service route, he said. The longer alternative comes around from the north. It's buildable, but it adds grading, drainage work, and more disturbance. How much more? Marissa asked. Landon glanced at her. Enough that we have to settle this route first. That wasn't my question. It's the answer I can give you. Marissa didn't like being handled carefully. Dylan could see her deciding whether Landon's caution meant the issue was important or merely inconvenient. Sophia studied the plan. A dark line left Copper Wash Road, followed an existing track, then turned south before reaching the project site. Parcel lines appeared faintly beneath it, but the plan carried a warning that ownership and access remained subject to verification. What did John review? She asked. An earlier version of this. Did he survey it? No. I asked him for a quick field opinion before we paid for the full access review. Then, whatever he said wasn't a certification. I understand that. Tammy touched the warning printed beneath the route. If this is a legal access problem, your company should have title records. We have records, Landon said. We also have a concern raised by the person who knew this ground better than anyone we spoke to. What concern? Dylan asked. Landon pointed to the place where the proposed road left the visible county track. John stopped here. You were with him? Sophia asked. Yes. We drove out together. He made me stop the truck, then walk the edge of the wash. He said the route shown on our plan relied too much on what people could see. The stakes? Dylan asked. He mentioned stakes that had moved years earlier. He told me the county road and the access we needed weren't automatically the same thing. Tammy shook her head. John could be overly careful. That's why I listened to him. Sophia brought out the field book. She kept it inside a clear sleeve and opened it to the copper wash note. This entry was made after runoff moved visible stakes, she said. The office record was supposed to be corrected. Landon read without touching the page. Is this the same location? The note doesn't give enough detail, Sophia said. But the field description fits this bend in the wash. She placed a sheet of tracing paper over the route plan. Using the county road reference and the turn Landon had identified, she marked the area John would have been checking. The shaded section covered a short but necessary part of the preferred route. Landon leaned over it. If that's where his concern was, we need the corrected record. We need it too, Dylan said. Marissa looked from the tracing paper to the van. Until then, the vehicle had been a broken thing Dylan refused to discard. Now, a project manager had driven across town because something inside it might answer a live access question. She didn't know the answer, and she didn't know whether it carried money. She only knew that other people had begun treating the contents seriously. Open the cabinet, she said. The rail is caught. Cut it. Sophia shook her head. Not with maps inside. Then remove the cabinet. That risks bending the drawers. Marissa turned to Dylan. You said the electrical repair worked. It powered the lock. The frame is twisted. How long will it take? I don't know. Landon rolled one corner of the plan between his fingers. Our 30 days started yesterday. That's your deadline, Marissa said. It becomes ours if John's record is the reason you called, Dylan replied. Tammy moved the brake drum off the estate clipboard and set the papers flat. Before this goes any further, I need to be clear about something. John didn't own forgotten land out there. Nobody had said he did. Dylan looked at her. Why bring that up? Because people hear access problem and start imagining things. I reviewed his property tax statements, bank records, and the papers in his desk. The estate had the house, the yard, the vehicles, and the accounts listed in the will. The residue was still included. Residue is included in most wills. So, you keep telling me. Tammy pressed one finger against the clipboard. If CW2 is a client survey, it doesn't become personal property in the ordinary sense just because the paper is inside your van. There may be retention duties, Sophia answered before Dylan could. The original record needs to remain protected. Any professional use requires verification. But possession and ownership aren't questions I can settle from a label. Then the safest place is the yard archive, Tammy said. The safest place is the cabinet where John filed it, Dylan replied. Once I can open that cabinet, Marissa crossed her arms. You mean once you spend the rest of your savings proving you inherited old paper? Dylan didn't ask how she knew about the cost. Sophia's face answered. Marissa had questioned her while they waited for Landon, and Sophia hadn't treated the estimate as a secret. Landon looked at Dylan. What do you need from me? Tell us everything John said at the site. That was most of it. He asked who had chosen the turn off the county road. I told him our engineer used the existing track. He said an existing track could cross several different rights without showing where one ended. Did he name an owner? Sophia asked. No. Did he mention a parcel? No. Did he show you a map? He said the useful copy was in his van. Everyone looked toward the open workshop door. That was the partial answer Dylan had needed. CW2 wasn't merely connected to some old correction in the same area. John had told Landon the useful record was in the van. Tammy heard the same thing and immediately understood the exposure. If the paper affected a current project, keeping probate simple would become harder. She wanted the record found, but she wanted it placed where she could account for it. When it opens, she said, I'm present. So am I, Marissa said. Dylan looked at Sophia. So am I, she added. Not for the estate, for the survey record. Landon rolled the plan and slid it back into the tube. I don't need to be present when you open personal files. I need to know whether John's concern applies to our route. We'll call you, Dylan said. Soon, please. Landon handed him a smaller copy of the proposed route. It showed no final ownership conclusions. It was simply the line his company hoped to use and the area that still needed proof. Before leaving, he stopped beside the van. John made me walk that bend twice, he said. The second time, he asked what would happen if our trucks blocked emergency access during a storm. What did you say? That we'd maintain passage. He believed you? I think he was deciding whether to. Landon left. Tammy gathered her papers. I want the card and field note photographed for the estate file. You can have copies, Dylan said, and the original record when it's found. No, not automatically. I'm not trying to take it from you. You're deciding where it belongs before seeing it. I'm trying to close your father's estate, then record that the cabinet came with the van and the cabinet is being repaired. Tammy's lips pressed together. She wrote something on the inventory form. Marissa remained beside the workbench after Tammy walked out. How much have you spent? She asked. That's my business. $18,000 is more than the van will ever be worth. Then you don't need to worry about it. I'm worried about Dad's files. You wanted them hauled to scrap 2 days ago. I didn't know a company was waiting for one. Dylan folded Landon's root copy and placed it inside a clean folder. That doesn't make the rest yours. Marissa looked at the cabinet, then at the new brake parts on the floor. I'll give you $5,000 for the van and everything in it. Sophia stopped sorting tools. Dylan stared at his sister. The offer was more than 8 times the appraisal and still far below what he'd committed to the repair. You said it was junk. I'm offering to save you from spending money you don't have. I had the money. Past tense? That's not your concern. It becomes my concern when you think Dad hid some answer for you because he left you the vehicle nobody else wanted. The words reached the place she intended. Dylan picked up the brake hose and checked its fitting before answering. No, he said. You didn't even think about it. I thought about it at the will reading. You didn't have this offer then. I had you telling me what my part of Dad's life was worth. Marissa took her coat from the chair. The offer stands until the yard sells. The answer doesn't. She left without another word. Sophia waited until Marissa's car was gone. That could have paid back some of what you spent and put the files in a yard she's selling. You don't have to convince me. I'm convincing myself. That's more expensive. They worked through the afternoon. The new rear brake assemblies fitted cleanly. One front caliper had to be replaced, but Sophia found the part in the morning delivery. Dylan flushed the lines while she watched for clear fluid at each wheel. When he pressed the pedal, it held firm for the first time. Again, Sophia said. He pressed it again. No drop. They lowered the van from the stands. Dylan released the parking brake, and Sophia pushed at the rear door. The van rolled across the workshop floor without a wheel dragging. It was only a few feet. The engine still couldn't start, and the damaged harness still needed hours of work, but the vehicle could be moved outside when Sophia needed the floor and brought back under cover when she returned. Dylan guided it through the door, with a tow strap attached to her pickup. The tires crossed the threshold and settled on the gravel behind the building. Sophia shut off the truck. "You met my deadline," she said. "One of them." His phone gave a short tone. Marissa had sent a written offer for the van and its contents. Beneath the amount, she'd added that any copper wash records should remain with Stevenson's survey yard during the sale. Dylan showed the message to Sophia. She noticed, Sophia said. He looked at Landon's route copy through the van window. A second deadline now sat beside the first. Marissa's offer would expire when the yard sold, and Landon's preferred road would disappear if the missing record stayed locked too long. Dylan opened the driver's door, set the parking brake, and turned the new battery to accessory. Behind him, the cabinet rail lifted and struck the bent frame again. The sound was cleaner than it had been before. Sophia listened from beside the open rear doors. "The rail's lifting all the way," she said. "The frame is stopping it." Dylan switched off the power. Then we straighten the frame. With the drawers loaded, we support the cabinet first. They brought the van back inside and removed the shelving above the workbench. The bolts fought them. John had used thread locker on everyone, then painted over the heads. Dylan heated a stubborn bolt and leaned against the wrench. Sophia held the cabinet brace. "Don't snap it." "I'm not trying to." That's what people say before snapping things. The bolt moved. They worked for 2 hours before reaching the upper cabinet mount. The impact had pushed the right corner backward less than half an inch. It wasn't much, but the drawer rail had almost no clearance. A hydraulic spreader could move the frame. It could also buckle a loaded drawer and destroy whatever lay near its edge. Dylan lowered the tool. "We need the drawers unlocked before we straighten it." "We need it straight before they unlock," Sophia said. "There may be a manual release from the top. What do we remove to reach it?" He looked toward the van's interior roof. "The whole cabinet." Sophia sat on the step. "You're going to say, 'There's another way.'" "There's another way." "Does it involve money?" "The wiring harness has to come out anyway. Once the dash is open, I can power each interlock separately and find which one isn't releasing fully. You already tested the cabinet solenoid, not under load from the complete circuit. How much more?" Dylan took out the estimate. The work already ordered covered the main brake system, battery, tires, basic wiring materials, fuel service, and the leaking windshield seal. A complete harness repair required outside equipment and several days of labor. Sophia called the electrical shop and put the phone on speaker. The technician listened while Dylan described the melted wires, rodent damage, auxiliary cabinet circuit, and old aftermarket connections. He gave a range, then asked whether Dylan wanted a temporary repair or the system rebuilt properly. "Properly," Dylan said. Sophia looked at him, but didn't interrupt. When the call ended, Dylan added the numbers. With the remaining parts and labor, the total reached the full $18,000 they had expected. Not close to it. Not possibly. 18,000. His phone rang before he could put the estimate down. The dispatcher for one of the mining contractors needed him for an urgent repair outside town. 3 vehicles had electrical faults after a storm. The work would take at least 3 days and pay enough to cover a useful part of the van. "When do you need me?" Dylan asked. "Now." "We've got somebody else who can start tomorrow, but you know the fleet." Dylan looked at the open dashboard. If he left, the van would sit until the following week. Landon would lose 4 more days from his deadline. Sophia needed the floor for a scheduled equipment delivery. "I can start Monday," Dylan said. "We can't wait until Monday." "I understand." "Can you give me an answer in 10 minutes?" Dylan already had one. I can't take it. The dispatcher was quiet for a moment. All right, we'll call the other mechanic. The line went dead. Sophia had heard the whole conversation. That job would have paid well, she said. Yes, you could have gone and lost 4 days. You've got bills that aren't attached to this van. I know. She didn't tell him he'd made the wrong choice. She also didn't soften it. A regular contractor who found someone else for an urgent job often kept using that someone else. Dylan opened his banking app. He transferred the remaining repair money while the parts shop waited on the phone. Afterward, his savings looked like they had before he'd learned to trust having any. He put the phone face down. Sophia gathered her survey bag. Landon wants us at Copper Wash this afternoon. He called you? He needs to know whether we can narrow John's concern before the cabinet opens. We can't certify anything from an old field note. I told him that. We can still look at the visible route. Dylan glanced at the van. The electrical shop can't take it until tomorrow, she said. Standing here won't make the harness heal. They met Landon beside Copper Wash Road. The project site lay east of Ely, where the ground opened into pale slopes, dry channels, and long stretches of scrub. Wind pushed dust across the road in thin sheets. The existing track left the county road near a shallow bend and followed the wash before turning toward the solar site. Landon had marked the proposed service route with small orange flags. Sophia stopped him before he led them onto the track. These flags show design, not ownership, she said. Correct. And anything we observe today is preliminary. Also correct. No one repeats that Sophia Keller verified access. Landon nodded. I need a useful question, not a convenient answer. That satisfied her enough to continue. Dylan carried the copy of John's field note. The wash looked ordinary from the road. Tire marks followed packed dirt between low banks. A few old wooden stakes stood on one side, gray from weather. Others leaned downstream at different angles. He understood why a person might trust them. They looked placed. They didn't look random. Sophia crouched beside the nearest one without touching it. This wasn't driven recently, she said. Could it have moved in the washout? Dylan asked. Anything visible here could have moved. Water doesn't care what a stake means. Landon pointed toward the proposed turn. John walked from here to that rise. They followed the route. The track narrowed where runoff had cut into one edge. A rusted drainage pipe crossed beneath it, partly filled with dirt and brush. Landon stopped at the place John had stopped. He stood here and looked back toward the county road, he said. Then he asked whether our legal description followed the road, the wash, or a surveyed line. What did you tell him? Sophia asked. That our consultant was checking. And he didn't accept that? He said checking wasn't the same as knowing? Dylan could hear his father saying it, not dramatically. John would have said it while looking at the ground, already irritated that someone had used the two words as if they meant the same thing. Sophia opened the public county map on her tablet. It was based on the familiar information likely stored as CW1. The scale was broad. It showed the road and surrounding parcels, but not enough detail to settle the short turn Landon needed. She compared it with the project route. The visible track drifts south here, she said. Is that wrong? Landon asked. It's different, that's all I can say. Different from what? From the general road line on this map. Dylan looked from the tablet to the ground. Would CW2 show the original line? If John made it as a correction, it should show what he relied on. Should? I haven't seen it. Landon walked farther along the track. The service road has to carry construction vehicles, maintenance trucks, and emergency traffic. We'd improve the drainage and keep passage open. Who uses it now? Dylan asked. Ranch access, utility crews, sometimes fire crews. Not often, but often isn't the standard during an emergency. John had asked Landon what happened if project trucks blocked the route in a storm. It hadn't been a stray complaint. He was testing whether the company understood that access created duties in both directions. Dylan studied the filled drainage pipe. If you use this route, you replace that. We'd replace it and maintain the wash crossing. And if you take the northern route, we leave this section as it is unless another agreement requires work. The preferred route wasn't only shorter. It put a company with equipment and money in a position to repair a neglected crossing. That didn't prove it should be allowed. It explained why John might have kept asking questions instead of simply objecting. Sophia walked to the far edge of the bend. She took several measurements from visible features, but none gave her a defensible boundary. The old stakes disagreed with one another. The public map was too general. The land itself had changed shape through years of runoff. When she returned, dust covered her boots. "I can confirm the inconsistency," she said. "The route follows the visible track. The visible track doesn't hold consistently to the road line shown on the county map." "Does that stop us?" Landon asked. "It stops me from telling you that you're clear. How much can the second record answer? If it contains John's corrected field measurements, possibly all of this location question." Landon looked toward the project site. "We have 27 days. Dylan folded the field note. "What happens if we don't find it?" "We move to the alternate route. I have to tell the design team soon enough to redesign before our permit window closes." "How soon?" 2 weeks would leave us room. After that, every day becomes expensive. The original 30-day deadline had sounded like Landon's problem. 2 weeks made it Dylan's. On the drive back, Sophia kept both hands on the wheel. "You gave up work for this," she said. "Yes." "You spent all 18,000? "Yes." "And we still don't know who the corrected line protects?" "No." "Then say what you're doing." Dylan watched the low hills pass outside the window. "I was trying to save the van." "You did. It rolls. That's not enough now." Sophia waited. He thought about the displaced stakes, the track drifting away from the line on the public map, and the blocked drainage pipe. He thought about John returning to correct a record when it would have been easier to leave the visible markers alone. "I want to find the survey Dad trusted," Dylan said. "Then I want you to test it before anybody builds, sells, or claims anything from it." "That's a different job." "I know. It may not give you what you want. I don't know what I want from it yet." That answer was more honest than the others. Back at the workshop, a tow truck had arrived from the electrical shop. Dylan signed the work order and watched the van climb onto the bed. The driver asked where to secure the rear chain. Dylan showed him a sound point on the frame and checked both hooks himself. Sophia stood beside the empty space in her workshop. "If the cabinet releases after the harness repair, we don't open it alone," she said. "Tammy and Marissa already demanded to be there. I mean, we document where every page sits before anyone moves it. And if CW2 is there, we make a working copy. The original stays protected until I test what it says." Dylan nodded. The van left the lot, carrying nearly all his savings, the job he'd turned down, and the only record that could explain what John had been protecting. Dylan followed it to the electrical shop, no longer trying to bring back a piece of his father's life, but to finish the question John had left in the ground. At the shop, Dylan stayed until the rear lights worked. The technician had planned to replace only the damaged sections, but the dashboard contained 3 old repairs wrapped in household electrical tape. One connection had been twisted together without a proper terminal. Another fed the cabinet through a fuse rated too high for the wire. "Who did this?" the technician asked. "Could have been Dad." "You don't have to defend him. I'm not. He hated electrical work." They pulled the harness onto a clean table. Dylan traced each branch against the diagram while the technician tested the connectors. Wherever John's cabinet system differed from the factory wiring, Dylan drew the change by hand. The work took 2 full days. Dylan missed another smaller repair call while he was there. He referred it to someone else instead of promising a time he couldn't keep. That felt different from losing the mining job. He had made the choice before anyone waited on him. The new tires arrived on the second afternoon. The fuel tank was drained, the lines were cleared, and the leaking windshield seal was replaced. A shop fan ran through the open doors to remove the smell of old gasoline. When everything was connected, Dylan sat behind the cracked steering wheel. The technician stood at the open hood. "Turn it once without starting." Dylan turned the key to accessory. The dashboard lights came on. The fuel gauge rose slowly. Behind him, the cabinet solenoid pulled with a strong metallic sound. Again, the technician called. Dylan switched it off and back on. The sound repeated without hesitation. He turned the key farther. The engine rolled twice, coughed, then stopped. The technician checked the fuel rail. Dylan tried again. This time, the engine started. Dust blew from the vents. The belt squealed for several seconds, then settled. The idle wandered before finding a rough rhythm. Dylan kept one hand on the wheel. John had taught him to drive in that seat on empty roads outside town. He'd told Dylan to listen to the engine, then spent the next hour talking over it. Sitting there now didn't feel like getting his father back. It felt like getting responsibility for something John had left unfinished. The technician lowered the hood, let it warm up, then check every circuit. Dylan tested the lights, heater, wipers, charging system, and cabinet interlock. Everything held. The engine temperature stayed steady. He paid the final invoice. The total cost of making the van operable, including the work at Sophia's shop, reached $18,000. Dylan signed the receipt and folded it into the vehicle file. There was no useful reason to look at his bank balance again. He drove the van out of the electrical shop under its own power. The steering pulled slightly to the right. The engine hesitated on the first hill. Every cabinet latch rattled over rough pavement. None of it stopped the van from moving through Ely, with its faded blue lettering visible on both sides. At Sophia's workshop, she came outside when she heard it. Dylan stopped in the gravel and set the parking brake. Sophia walked around the front, checked the tires, then looked through the open driver's window. "You've got an exhaust rattle." "Hello to you too. The left headlight is aimed at the moon. It runs. I can hear that." She opened the side door and switched on the interior lights. Both came on. Then she tested the cabinet circuit. The lock rail lifted hard against the bent frame. "Good," she said. "Good? We removed one unknown. Power isn't the problem now." Dylan backed the van into the workshop. He unloaded a steel frame he'd made at the electrical shop from scrap tubing. It fit around the cabinet without touching the drawer faces. Threaded rods pressed against the cabinet's reinforced corners. By measuring the frame at several points, they could move the bent section a fraction at a time. Sophia examined the welds. "You built this instead of sleeping." "I slept." "When?" "During the paint drying." "There's no paint. That's why it didn't take long." They photographed every cabinet edge before applying pressure. Sophia measured the diagonal distance from corner to corner and wrote each reading on tape attached to the workbench. Dylan tightened the first rod a quarter turn. The frame creaked. They waited. Nothing shifted inside the drawers. He tightened the opposite rod. Sophia measured again. "1/8 of an inch," she said. They continued slowly. Every adjustment changed the cabinet by less than the width of a pencil line. After the fourth adjustment, the visible twist at the top began to disappear. Dylan powered the interlock. The rail rose and stayed up. Neither of them touched the copper wash handle. Sophia leaned close to the cabinet and listened. "No contact? You're sure?" "Power it again." He did. The rail moved through its full travel without striking the frame. That was the practical result they needed. The wiring worked. The cabinet stood square. For the first time since they found the index card, nothing mechanical appeared to prevent the drawer from opening. Dylan reached toward the handle, then stopped. "I told Tammy we'd call before anything came out. You also need a camera running, and clean space for the maps." Sophia nodded. "We open one drawer at a time. We photograph the top sheet before moving it. If we find CW2, I copy it here and protect the original." "Who gets the copies?" "You." "Tammy for the estate file. Me for field verification. Landon gets only what applies to his route, after we know whether he has a right to it." "And Marissa?" Sophia glanced at him. "That depends on what the record is." Dylan had spent years waiting for Marissa to decide when he belonged in family work. He wasn't going to reverse the pattern by excluding her simply because he now controlled the door. "She can be present," he said. "She doesn't handle the papers." "Agreed." They set up a folding table beneath clean lights. Sophia covered it with acid-free paper from her office. Dylan mounted his phone above the table and tested the camera angle. He photographed the cabinet, the key, the powered rail, and the unopened drawer. Then he placed a narrow strip of signed tape across the drawer edge. If anyone opened it before the scheduled inspection, the tape would tear. Sophia watched him initial the strip. "You don't trust your sister," she said. "I don't trust pressure." "That's a careful answer. It's the useful one." He called Tammy first. "The cabinet mechanism is repaired," he said. "Did you open it?" "No." "When will you?" "Tomorrow morning at 9, here at Sophia's workshop." "That's too soon. I need to check Mr. Bell's schedule. He doesn't need to be there. The van and contents were distributed. If this may affect the estate, I want an independent person present. Sophia is licensed, and we're recording the inspection. She worked for John. That's why she can identify his records." Tammy lowered her voice. "Dylan, slow down. Finding a card doesn't mean there's an asset." "I didn't say asset. Marissa has been saying it." "What has she been saying?" "That John may have kept survey work out of the yard records." "That's possible. That would complicate the sale and probate. Then we need to know." Tammy wanted more time, because time usually returned control to procedure. Dylan no longer needed procedure to approve the inspection. He only needed to preserve the record properly. 9 tomorrow, he said. I'll send the address and the steps we're following. I'm not agreeing that anything you find stays with you. We're not deciding that tomorrow. What are we deciding? What exists? Tammy accepted the time without accepting his terms. Marissa answered on the first ring. So it opens? She asked. The mechanism works. Have you looked? No. Why not? Because I want everyone to see where the record comes from. That sounds like something Sophia told you to say. It's what I decided. Marissa was quiet. Tammy will be there, Dylan continued. You can come. You don't remove anything. If it's a Stevenson survey record, it belongs with the business. You can make that argument after we identify it. The yard buyer wants an answer about the archive. What answer? Whether the field records are complete. They're not complete. Some are in the van because Dad left them there. He didn't leave them there. He neglected them there. Dylan looked at the restored cabinet frame. You offered $5,000 for that neglect. Marissa didn't respond. 9 tomorrow, he said. I'll be there. After the call, he sent one message to both women. It listed the inspection time, the address, and the handling steps. Photographs before movement, copies made on site. Original documents protected. No removal until ownership and professional duties were clear. He sent the same procedure to Landon, though he told him not to attend. Landon replied that he understood and asked for a call as soon as they knew whether John's record touched the proposed route. Sophia read the messages. You've made this very formal. I've made it hard for anyone to say later that they weren't told, and easy for them to know exactly where the drawer is. Dylan looked toward the workshop door. The van could be locked. The cabinet had its own key. Sophia had an alarm, and the sign tape would show interference. Still, the message had given Marissa a time, a place, and a precise target. He moved the van to the center bay, locked every door, and kept both keys. Sophia opened a drawer in her office and handed him a small alarm sensor. Attach that inside the side door, she said. It calls my phone if the door opens. You keep alarm sensors in your desk? I survey empty land for a living. People assume empty means unwatched. He installed it and tested the signal. Sophia's phone sounded immediately. Before they left, Dylan took the van for a short drive around the block. Sophia rode in the passenger seat with her survey bag at her feet. The brakes held at every stop. The charging light stayed off. Warm air came through the vents. When they returned, Dylan parked beneath the workshop light and switched off the engine. For the first time, the van had completed a trip and returned ready for another. Sophia checked the sign tape through the side window. Still sealed, she said. Dylan locked the workshop. Marissa's written offer remained on his phone. It no longer offered to save him from a broken vehicle. It offered to buy a running one, a repaired cabinet, and whatever waited behind the copper wash handle. He had secured the first clean chance to examine John's record. In doing it openly, he had also shown Marissa exactly what she would need to control before the drawer moved. The alarm sounded at 8:40 the next morning. Sophia's phone rang first. Dylan's followed a few seconds later because she'd added him to the alert list. He reached the workshop before she did. Marissa and Tammy stood outside the locked door. Neither had entered. The alarm had been triggered when Marissa pulled the side handle to see whether it was open. I touched the door, she said. You're acting like I broke in. Dylan checked the lock. It held. Through the window, the sign tape remained across the copper wash drawer. You arrived early. So did you. Because the alarm called me. Tammy looked tired. Can we go inside and lower our voices? Sophia arrived with her survey bag and unlocked the workshop. She silenced the alarm, then checked the van before allowing anyone near the cabinet. The tape was intact. The side doors were locked. Nothing had moved. Dylan set up the camera while Tammy placed her estate clipboard on the clean table. Marissa didn't remove her coat. Before you open anything, read this. She handed Sophia a printed page. It wasn't a court order or a letter from an attorney. Marissa had written it herself, as the owner of Stevenson Survey Yard. It stated that she didn't consent to the copying, release, or professional use of any business record belonging to the yard. She had signed and dated it that morning. Sophia read it twice. You don't know that the drawer holds a business record, Dylan said. That's why it shouldn't be opened in her office. It's my van, and my father's survey archive. Our father. You know what I mean. Dylan looked at Tammy. Did you approve this? I didn't write it. That wasn't my question. Tammy placed both hands on her clipboard. I told Marissa that the estate needs a clear record of anything found. Then we photograph it. She wants the original kept with the business if it's a client file. She wants everything kept with property she's selling. Marissa took a second page from her bag. This is a custody agreement. If the drawer contains survey records, Sophia can examine them here. Afterward, the originals return to the yard archive. Dylan read it. The language didn't distinguish between a client file, John's personal record, public data, or anything connected to property outside the business. It simply gave Stevenson Survey Yard possession of every survey document they found. No, he said. Marissa turned to Sophia. Then you're helping him remove business records after being told they're disputed. Sophia set the notice on the table. I'm not removing anything. You're planning to copy it. If a field record affects an active boundary question, making a protected working copy can be proper. Without the business owner's permission, the record may not belong to the business. Then let Dylan prove that first. That was the counterstep Marissa had prepared. She couldn't take the van. She couldn't undo the will. She could place enough doubt around the records to make Sophia's license and practice part of the fight. Sophia looked at Dylan. We can't open the drawer today. His hand stopped over the camera mount. Why? Because we agreed to handle the record cleanly. It isn't clean if I'm accused in writing before I touch it. She wrote that herself. She still owns the yard. She doesn't own the van. I know. Then what changed? My professional involvement is being challenged. I need to separate that from your ownership. Marissa relaxed slightly. She hadn't expected Sophia to surrender, but delay was enough. Delay returned control to the person with the yard, the archive, and a buyer waiting. Dylan removed his phone from the mount. You called Landon too, he said. Marissa didn't answer. What did you tell him? That all requests for Stevenson survey records should come through the yard. His request came through you. You gave him my number. That was before I knew you planned to use one card to take over Dad's unfinished work. I'm trying to find the record he told Landon about. You're trying to become the person Dad trusted after he's no longer here to correct you. Tammy said her name quietly. Marissa's face changed, but she didn't take the words back. Dylan folded the tripod legs one at a time. For years, he had believed the worst part of losing the yard was that John had chosen Marissa to keep it. Marissa had believed something almost opposite. She thought Dylan's broken van had become a way to claim a trust John never clearly gave either of them. The difference didn't make her demand reasonable. It made the demand harder to dismiss as greed. Sophia moved the unsigned custody agreement away from the clean paper. What did Landon say? She asked. He said he'd wait for the estate to clarify who could release the records. His deadline keeps running. He knows that. Dylan looked at Tammy. You're the executor. Clarify it. I can confirm the van and its contents were distributed to you. Then do that. I can't decide whether a professional record belongs to the vehicle or the surveying business without knowing what it is. We can't know what it is without opening the drawer. That is the problem. Marissa reached into her bag again. I'll reimburse the full $18,000, she said. You sign over the van and contents. I'll place any field records in the yard archive, and Tammy can finish probate. The amount was written on a simple purchase form. Her earlier offer had been $5,000. Landon's interest and the repaired vehicle had raised it to the exact amount Dylan had spent. She wasn't offering him a gain. She was offering a way to escape without a visible loss. Sophia read his expression. You should think before answering, she said. Marissa mistook that for support. You get your savings back, she continued. The van stays connected to Dad's business. This stops becoming a family fight. It was a family fight when the van was worth $600, Dylan said. No, it wasn't. You made it one. Tammy looked down at the clipboard. Dylan didn't sign. What happens to the van after the yard sells? He asked. It goes with the business records. To whom? The buyer, if they want it. And if they don't? That's not the point. It is to me. Marissa put the form back into her bag. Then I'm ending Sophia's access to the yard archive. Sophia's eyes narrowed. You already did. I sent you notice this morning. You can finish the 2 jobs you copied, but no more books leave the property. You know, some of those records support boundaries I'm required to retrace. You can request copies like any other surveyor. And wait how long? As long as the sale requires. Marissa had found the place where Dylan's plan reached beyond him. Sophia had helped tow the van, lent her floor, traced the field note, and placed her professional name beside the investigation. Now she would lose practical access to records she needed for paying work. Dylan felt the cost settle before Sophia spoke. "This isn't his decision," she said. "No," Marissa replied. "It's mine." "Then don't pretend it protects the archive. You're using access to control a document you haven't seen. I'm protecting what I inherited." So is Dylan. Marissa's expression hardened because Sophia had placed the two inheritances on equal ground. Tammy stepped between them. "Nobody opens the drawer today." Dylan gets written confirmation of the distribution. Sophia reviews her duties. "Then we meet again." "When?" Dylan asked. "Give me 3 business days. Landon has less than 4 weeks. I can't make probate move according to a solar schedule. You can send 1 signed page today. I'll speak to Mr. Bell." Marissa headed toward the door. Dylan stopped her. "If the record turns out to be a business file, I'll preserve it and provide lawful access. That's not the same as returning it." "No, it isn't. If it's personal, I keep it. If it affects the yard, we deal with that after Sophia verifies it. You've already decided you control the answer. I've decided you don't control it before we have one." Marissa left. Tammy remained long enough to photograph the unbroken tape and note the cabinet condition. She promised nothing beyond calling Mr. Bell. When she was gone, Sophia sat on the van's side step. "I have a boundary job next month that depends on a John Field book I haven't copied." "I heard. I can rebuild the control, but it adds field days. I'll help." "You're not a licensed surveyor. I can drive, carry equipment, clear brush, repair anything that fails, and work under your direction. That doesn't replace the archive." "No." Sophia looked toward her office. Marissa's notice lay on the table beside the clean paper, prepared for a discovery that hadn't happened. "You exposed my practice," she said. "I did. You followed the process I told you to follow, and it still happened. I gave Marissa the target. She would have found one eventually. That doesn't remove what it costs you." "No." Dylan sat across from her on a low stool. "I can move the van," he said. "If you need distance from this, I'll rent a secure bay. That won't restore my access. It gets the dispute out of your workshop, and takes the one person who can identify John's notation away from the drawer. I'm not asking you to leave. You're offering me an exit because that's how you handle being useful. You carry the bad part and hope nobody sends you away." Dylan looked at the concrete floor. "What do you want?" he asked. "A clean roll. I authenticate the survey work. I don't decide the estate. I don't become your witness against Marissa. And if a record creates duties, you don't treat those duties as someone else's problem." "I agree." "Say what that means." "If we find a client record, it stays protected. If another owner or surveyor has a proper right to use it, we provide access. If it affects Landon's route, we test it before releasing conclusions. If it creates work, I don't expect you to do that work for free. And the yard books, I help you rebuild whatever field control Marissa blocks, for as long as that takes." Sophia studied him. "That could be weeks." "I know. You already turned down work. I know that too." The answer didn't repair the harm. It gave the harm a place in his decision. Sophia stood and removed Marissa's notice from the clean table. "The drawer stays sealed until Tammy confirms distribution in writing," she said. "After that, Marissa's objection doesn't stop an inspection. It only defines how careful we have to be." Dylan took the unsigned purchase form from where Marissa had left a copy beneath the brake drum. He tore nothing. He folded it and put it with the estate papers. He could recover his savings, return the responsibility, and let the deadline become someone else's failure. Instead, he checked the signed tape, locked the van, and accepted that whatever waited in the drawer would come with access duties, field work, professional costs, and a sister who would fight every inch she believed belonged to the yard. Then he took Sophia's survey bag to her truck and asked where they would begin rebuilding the control Marissa had taken away. Sophia handed him a fluorescent vest and pointed toward the rear of the truck. "Tripod, receiver, stakes, and the long case," she said. "Nothing gets dropped because you're thinking about the van. I know how to carry equipment. I've seen you carry too much equipment." The first job was on the edge of Ely, where 2 commercial parcels met behind a row of storage buildings. John's old field book would have saved them several hours. Without it, Sophia had to rebuild her position from public control points and measurements she could verify herself. Dylan cleared broken glass from one marker, held the rod, and wrote each reading exactly where Sophia told him. He didn't offer guesses. He didn't ask whether they were close enough. By noon, she had recovered the line she needed. It took longer than using John's notes, but it was defensible. Sophia saved the data twice and stood beside the truck eating crackers from a torn packet. "One down," Dylan said. "One partly down. What's left?" "A return visit after I calculate the corners. I'm available. You have your own work, not today. That's the problem." Dylan loaded the tripod. Sophia watched him secure the case. "You don't owe me every lost hour. I said I'd help rebuild what Marissa blocked." "You did. I meant it. I know. I'm telling you not to turn that promise into another way of disappearing into work." His phone rang before he could answer. Tammy had spoken with Mr. Bell. He could meet them at 3. "Marissa should come," Tammy said. "Invite her? You're not objecting?" "No." Tammy sounded surprised. "I thought you might want this handled without her. I want her to hear the same answer." Mr. Bell met them in the same conference room where the will had been read. The cold coffee and appraisal sheets were gone. A single page waited at each seat. Marissa arrived last and didn't remove her coat. Mr. Bell began without ceremony. "The question I was asked is narrow. Who received the van, its cabinet, and the papers physically stored inside it?" He turned to Dylan. "The will gave you the vehicle and its contents. You signed the receipt. Tammy signed the distribution record as executor. The title was transferred. On the information I have, you have the right to possess and inspect those contents." Marissa tapped the page. "Even if they're business records, possession is not the same as freedom from professional duties. A client file may carry retention or access requirements. I'm not qualified to advise on survey licensing." "So this settles nothing," she said. "It settles who may open his own cabinet." Dylan looked at Tammy. She kept her eyes on Mr. Bell. "What about the residue?" Dylan asked. "The residuary clause is also straightforward. If an estate asset was omitted from the specific gifts, and John still owned it at his death, it passes under that clause after valid expenses and claims. Even if nobody listed it in the inventory, if something is later found, the inventory can be corrected. The omission doesn't rewrite the will." Tammy spoke carefully. "We have no evidence of another asset." "Correct," Mr. Bell said. "The clause proves who receives estate residue. It does not prove additional property exists. That distinction mattered. The will could carry something John had omitted, but it couldn't create it. Dylan still needed the record, the ground, and an ownership chain that matched both." Marissa looked at him. "You asked about property before seeing the drawer. I asked what the clause means. You think Dad owns something near Copper Wash. I don't know what Dad was correcting." "You're hoping." Dylan considered denying it. The answer would have been easy and false. "I'm hoping the work meant something," he said. "That's not the same as deciding what it means." Mr. Bell slid a short acknowledgement toward Tammy. It confirmed that the van and contents had been distributed to Dylan. It also stated that any newly identified estate property would be handled according to the existing will and ordinary probate accounting. He didn't order anyone to cooperate. He didn't decide who owned a survey record. He confirmed the rule already written and left them to face what it might do. Tammy signed as executor. Her pen paused before the final stroke. "I should have written a fuller inventory when the van was distributed," she said. Marissa turned toward her. "You couldn't inventory a locked cabinet. I could have noted it separately." "Does that change anything?" "No." Tammy handed the page to Dylan. "But now it's clear. That was the uncertainty he needed removed." Marissa could still challenge how a professional record was used. She could no longer treat the cabinet as part of the yard, simply because it had once served John's work. Mr. Bell gathered his copies. "If you find a document that appears to affect ownership, don't assume the document proves itself. Confirm the public record." Sophia nodded. That was already the plan. The meeting ended. Outside, Marissa stopped Dylan beside his truck. "You could call the broker," she said. "Why would I?" "Tell him the archive is disputed. Tell him Landon's project may depend on missing records. He'll delay the yard sale." Dylan looked at her. "You think I want that?" "I think you want the yard to stay the way Dad left it." "It isn't the way he left it." "You're emptying it. Then call. Make the sale difficult. At least admit what this is." She wanted him to take the cruel shortcut, because it would make his intentions familiar. If he damaged her sale, she could tell herself the cabinet was only another fight over who had received more. "I'm not calling your broker," he said. "You have a reason. I have leverage you're worried about. That doesn't make every use of it right." Marissa's face tightened. "So, you get to be careful now?" "I'm trying. You weren't careful when Sophia lost access. No, I wasn't. The admission left Marissa without the argument she expected. Dylan continued. The drawer opens tomorrow at 9. You're still invited. Why? Because Dad's record may affect your sale. Because you're his daughter. Because excluding you would feel good for 5 minutes and poison everything after. You assume there's an after. I'm leaving that choice open. Marissa stepped toward her car. If the map has nothing to do with property, the yard sale continues. I know. And if it does, we verify it before anybody makes demands. She opened the car door. You sound like him? It wasn't praise. She drove away before Dylan could decide whether to answer. At Sophia's workshop, they prepared for the inspection again. Dylan placed Mr. Bell's acknowledgement beside the distribution receipt and the van title. Those papers established custody, nothing more. Sophia arranged clean sleeves for large maps and tested the overhead camera. If the drawer contains ordinary client records, I'll identify the job type and stop, she said. We don't display names or private notes for no reason. If it contains CW2, we photograph it in place, then lift it onto the clean table. I inspect the signature, date, symbols, and field references. Can you authenticate it here? I can identify John's work and decide whether it's usable for field testing. Final confirmation requires the ground and the public ownership record. Dylan checked Landon's root copy. If it gives bearings, we take the equipment to copper wash. If it names a recording reference, we request a certified copy. We don't rely on a handwritten number. And if it shows nothing useful, we put it back and tell Landon we can't support his route from John's record. The answer carried the possibility that $18,000, lost work, and a damaged family relationship had led to a map with no present value. Dylan accepted that possibility more easily now. His job was no longer to force the record to reward him. Sophia opened the long equipment case and tested the receiver. She added a metal detector, digging tools, flagging, and 2 short probes. You're preparing for monuments, Dylan said. I'm preparing for whatever the field record tells us to look for. We don't know there are monuments. No, we know John was checking an original line. Surveyors prefer durable references when they can get them. She called the county recorder's office. A certified document could usually be prepared the same day if they supplied the correct book and page. Without that reference, a broad search could take longer and might still miss records indexed under an unexpected description. Sophia wrote the request procedure beside the scanner. Then Dylan called Landon. We open the drawer tomorrow, he said. If the record applies to your route, Sophia will test it before giving you a conclusion. How soon can you reach the site? Landon asked. We're preparing to go directly from the workshop. I'll have access to the project gate ready. No construction work near the bend until she finishes. We're not building there yet. Keep it that way. Landon agreed. He also confirmed that 12 days remained before his team needed to commit to redesign. The formal deadline was longer, but the practical choice would come first. After the call, Dylan wrote the project contact and access instructions on the inspection sheet. Sophia watched him. If this record gives you control over Landon's route, you could refuse access and force the redesign. I know. Marissa might expect you to. She expects me to use it against her too. What will you do? I'll decide after we know what it protects and what using it requires. That was the only answer he could give, honestly. The next morning, Tammy arrived with the estate acknowledgement clipped above a blank inventory page. Marissa came a few minutes later. She brought no purchase offer and no custody agreement. Sophia started the overhead camera. She stated the date, the location, and the names of the people present. Then she showed the unbroken tape across the drawer. Dylan unlocked the side door. He turned the ignition to accessory and set the parking brake. The cabinet rail lifted cleanly. He removed the signed tape, placed it on the inspection sheet, and wrapped his fingers around the copper wash drawer handle. Before you pull that, Marissa said, put my objection on the recording. Dylan kept his hand on the handle. Sophia looked toward the camera. State it clearly. Marissa faced the clean table. I believe anything in that drawer is part of Stevenson Survey Yard's business archive. Dad owned no unlisted property near Copper Wash, and the residue in the will has nothing to do with these files. Tammy shifted beside her. You can't state the last part as fact. I just did. Dylan waited until Sophia noted the time. Then he pulled. The drawer moved slowly at first. Dust along the runners made a dry scraping sound. Dylan supported the center with his other hand and brought it fully open. A large county map lay on top, beneath a sheet of cloudy protective paper. Sophia photographed it in place. Visible marking reads, CW-1, she said. Marissa let out a breath. That's the map we already knew about. No one moves it yet, Sophia replied. She checked the edges, then lifted the protective sheet. The map showed Copperwash Road, nearby parcel lines, and the general county information she had viewed on her tablet. It contained no detailed correction at Landon's turn. Sophia and Dylan moved it together onto the clean table. A second sheet lay beneath it. It was drawn on heavier field paper and secured inside a narrow cover. CW2 appeared in John's handwriting at the upper right. The same diagonal correction mark crossed the corner. Nobody spoke. Sophia photographed the second map where it rested. Dylan saw his father's signature along the lower edge and a date from 2016. He also saw lines, bearings, notes, and a narrow outline parcel beside the wash. He didn't yet understand what they proved. The drawer held a second map, Tammy said quietly. Marissa stepped closer. Sophia raised one hand. Please stay behind the table. What does it show? Dylan asked. I need to examine it. They lifted the map by its cover and laid it beneath the overhead camera. Sophia read from left to right without offering a conclusion. John had marked 2 buried survey monuments. Bearings ran between them and defined a separate strip containing 2.4 acres. The strip followed the useful part of Landon's proposed access route. Near the bottom, John had written a book and page reference beside the words, recorded purchase. Dylan read the owner's name twice, John Stevenson. That can't be right, Marissa said. Sophia pointed to the date and signature. This is a signed field map. It appears to be John's work. I'm not authenticating the boundary until I test the monuments. He never told us he bought land there, Marissa said. Tammy had gone pale. She reached toward the correction mark, then stopped before touching the cover. I've seen that mark, she said. You said you hadn't, Dylan replied. Not on the index card, not where I understood it. Where did you see it? Tammy looked at the map again. John asked me to drive him to Copperwash in 2024. He didn't want to take his own truck over the rough road. Why didn't you tell us? Marissa asked. I didn't know this was what he checked. What did he do there? Sophia asked. He carried a detector and a short shovel. He made me hold a field book while he checked 2 places in the ground. When he finished, he drew that mark at the top of the page. Did you see the page? Only the corner. He closed the book when the wind picked up. Did he say what he found? He said, both are still there. I thought he meant old survey points for a client. Sophia looked at the 2 monument symbols on CW2. That supports the field history, she said. It doesn't replace testing. Marissa shook her head. Tammy remembering a drive doesn't make Dad the owner. No, Dylan said. The recorded document does, if the reference is accurate. Sophia made a working copy while the original remained beneath the camera. Tammy logged each page. CW1 went into one sleeve. CW2 went into another, with no folds added and nothing erased or marked. The county recorder's office prepared the certified packet that afternoon. Dylan, Sophia, Tammy, and Marissa waited in the public records area while a clerk retrieved the document by book and page. The clerk returned with a stamped copy and placed it on the counter. The recorded deed showed that John had purchased the 2.4-acre strip in 2016. He held it in his own name. No later transfer appeared in the certified title packet. Marissa turned through the pages. Could this have been sold without showing here? Not if the transfer was recorded, Sophia said. What if Dad intended it to go with the yard? Intent isn't a transfer, Tammy said. Her voice had changed. She was no longer trying to keep the estate simple by pushing the records into familiar categories. The certified packet had made simplicity impossible. Tammy called Mr. Bell from the hallway and put him on speaker. She gave him the recorded description, the date, and the ownership name. Was this listed among the specific gifts? He asked. No, Tammy said. Was it transferred before John's death? The title packet shows no transfer, then add it to the estate inventory. Subject to the ordinary title review, it passes under the residuary clause. To Dylan, Marissa said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Mr. Bell replied. That is what the will says. He didn't congratulate Dylan. He didn't accuse anyone of missing the property. He confirmed the rule and asked Tammy to send the certified packet for the supplemental inventory. Marissa ended the call herself. "The yard used that road," she said. "Did it?" Dylan asked. "I don't know. Dad's crews worked everywhere. That doesn't change the deed. It explains why he bought it. Maybe. You think he bought it for you?" "I think he left the residue to me. I don't know why he bought this until we test the map." Marissa closed the packet. For the first time, she had no version of the estate division that made Dylan's gift an afterthought. The van's drawer had preserved the only field map that connected John's recorded purchase to a boundary that could still be found. The next morning, they met at Copper Wash. Sophia carried the working copy of CW2 inside a weatherproof sleeve. The original remained locked in her file cabinet under a custody receipt signed by Dylan and Tammy. Landon waited near the project gate. He had brought the preferred route plan and 2 marked stakes, but he kept them in his truck until Sophia gave permission. She began from a control point outside the disputed area. Dylan held the rod while she established the first bearing shown on John's map. The line led toward the low rise where John had walked with Landon. Sophia swept the metal detector across the ground. It sounded once over a piece of rusted wire. Dylan removed it. The second signal was narrow and steady. "Dig carefully," she said. He cut a shallow square in the packed soil. Several inches down, the shovel touched metal. Dylan switched to a hand tool and cleared the dirt. A capped survey monument stood upright beneath the surface. Its markings matched John's description on CW2. Tammy crouched at the edge of the hole. "This is one of the places," she said. "He made me stand back because I kept dropping dirt into it." Sophia recorded the position, condition, and cap markings. Then she followed John's bearing toward the wash. The second point lay near the edge of the existing track, buried beneath gravel carried by runoff. The detector found it after 3 passes. Dylan uncovered the cap without moving it. Sophia measured between the 2 monuments, checked the bearings, and compared them with John's field map. She repeated the observations from a second setup. Landon waited without asking for an early answer. At last, Sophia returned to the road. "The 2 monuments match the map," she said. "The measured bearings support John's corrected boundary. The proposed service route crosses the 2.4-acre strip shown in the recorded deed." "Is the route usable?" Landon asked. "Yes, if the owner grants access and the project maintains the conditions required for safe passage." Landon looked at Dylan. "That owner is you once the estate inventory is corrected." Tammy opened her folder. "The supplemental inventory is prepared. The title packet and will leave 1 distribution result." Marissa stood beside her car with her hands in her coat pockets. "The yard was specifically given to me," she said. "This strip was bought while Dad ran the business." Tammy answered before Dylan could. "The deed names John personally. The will names the yard property separately. The strip wasn't included in that gift. You missed it." "Yes," Tammy said, "I did. And that means Dylan gets it. It means John's residuary gift controls it." Marissa looked toward the uncovered monument. "He didn't even know it existed." "No," Dylan said. "I didn't. That's supposed to make this better? It makes it true." Landon removed a folder from his truck. "Our company has reviewed the corrected route and the title packet. We're prepared to offer $480,000 for a permanent access easement across the strip." Nobody laughed or spoke. The number settled into the wind and the dry sound of brush against gravel. Landon continued. "This is not a purchase of the land. Dylan keeps ownership. The easement requires the owner to maintain drainage performance, keep emergency passage available, and coordinate closures with the project and local responders. We fund the initial road and drainage improvements. Long-term duties remain with the land." Marissa looked at Dylan as if waiting for triumph. He felt none. $480,000 removed the immediate danger created by the van repair and lost work. It also attached him to a road, a wash, emergency access, maintenance decisions, and a company that would use the route for years. "What happens to the existing users?" he asked. "Proper passage remains," Landon said. "The agreement can state that clearly." "And storm damage? We repair construction damage. Routine drainage and later maintenance follow the allocation in the easement." Sophia reviews the route description. She should. Tammy gets a copy for probate. Of course. Landon held out the written offer. Dylan took it, but he didn't sign. Marissa's certainty had rested on the belief that the van contained leftovers and the residue contained nothing. Both beliefs were gone now. The second map, the matching monuments, the recorded deed, and the will all pointed to one result. Dylan owned the strip. He closed Landon's folder. "I'll consider the easement," he said, "but the drainage and emergency passage aren't fine print. We settle those before your deadline, or there's no route." Landon nodded. "That's reasonable," he said. "I'll have the language revised. I want the route staked from Sophia's measurements, not the old visible track. We can do that. And no work begins until the easement is recorded." "Agreed." Marissa turned away from the group and walked to her car. Tammy called after her, but she didn't stop. Dylan watched her leave. Tammy closed the supplemental inventory folder. "I'll speak to her. Not for me. She shouldn't drive away like this. She can leave." Tammy studied him, perhaps hearing that he meant more than the field meeting. "I'll send the correction to Mr. Bell today," she said. "And the archive? What about it? No records move with the yard sale until they're cataloged." Tammy nodded. "That's fair. It's not a favor. You're the executor." "I know." 2 days later, Landon returned with the revised agreement. They met at Sophia's office. The easement description followed the bearings she'd tested, and the route stayed within the strip. The company would rebuild the wash crossing, install proper drainage, and repair construction damage. Dylan would keep the crossing clear afterward and guarantee emergency passage. Sophia read the description against CW2, while Dylan worked through the ordinary language with Landon. "If a storm damages the new crossing during construction," Dylan asked. "We repair it," Landon said. "After construction, routine maintenance becomes yours. Damage caused by our equipment remains ours. And if emergency crews need the road while you're moving materials, they have priority. Put that in the operating section, too." Landon made a note. The offer remained $480,000. It sounded enormous until Dylan sat with the practical numbers. Taxes would take a share. Legal and recording costs needed paying. Long-term drainage work required a reserve. The road could fail in a season of heavy runoff, whether the solar project earned money or not. Landon didn't pretend otherwise. "You can reject it," he said. "We still have time to use the alternate route. Would you? If the duties don't work for you, yes." Dylan looked toward Sophia. "The map gives him the right to decide," she said. "It doesn't tell him which decision is responsible. He accepted the easement after the final changes were made." At the signing, Landon placed the company's copy beside Dylan's. Tammy attended because the strip had to pass through the corrected estate inventory before the easement could be recorded. No crowd watched. No one applauded. Dylan signed his name beneath the maintenance section. Landon signed for the company. Tammy witnessed the estate transfer documents. When the funds arrived, Dylan first paid the remaining van bills. He set aside the estimated taxes and placed a separate amount in an account used only for drainage and emergency access. The money that remained gave him choices. It didn't remove the work attached to them. Landon's crew began by clearing the blocked pipe near the bend. Dylan stood beside the road while they lifted out packed dirt, roots, and rusted metal. Sophia checked the staked route before any grading moved beyond the existing track. At noon, Landon joined Dylan near the first monument. "You could have asked for more," he said. "I could have refused." "Yes." "Would the company have paid more?" Landon smiled slightly. That question came late. "I wasn't asking for negotiation. No. We believe the offer was fair because the route saves us enough to support it. Your conditions also make the road more reliable." Dylan looked at the cleared wash crossing. "John asked whether you'd keep passage open." "He did. Now it's written. That's why written agreements exist." Landon went back to his crew. Their relationship would never become family, and it didn't need to. He had needed access. Dylan had needed the route treated as more than a line on a project plan. Both now had a reason to hold the other to the same page. Tammy came to Sophia's office that afternoon, carrying 3 archive boxes from the yard. "I made an index," she said. Sophia opened the first box. Each field book had a numbered slip beneath it. Tammy had listed the date range, visible job codes, and physical condition without opening private client pages. "You did all this since the field meeting?" Dylan asked. "I should have done it before distributing anything." "That's true." Tammy accepted the answer. She took the CW2 index card from its protective sleeve and compared it with her new list. "I laughed at the appraisal," she said. I thought John had given you a burden because he didn't know how to give you anything else. Dylan waited. I was wrong. That doesn't restore Sophia's access. No. Tammy slid a signed page across the desk. It allowed Sophia to inspect and copy yard records needed for existing professional work while probate remained open. Any future access would depend on the yard's owner and a written archive policy. Marissa agreed to this? Sophia asked. She didn't object before the deadline I gave her. That isn't the same thing. It's enough for me to perform the executor's work. Sophia read the page and accepted it. Tammy looked at Dylan. I'd like to help finish the archive. Why? Because John left it badly, and I treated closing the estate as more important than understanding what I was closing. That's an explanation. It's also work I know how to do. Dylan didn't forgive her because she had labeled 3 boxes. He also didn't deny that the boxes were properly done. You can help under Sophia's record rules, he said. No files leave without a log. No one decides ownership from where a box happens to sit. Tammy nodded. All right, and no calls to Marissa about every page. Her face tightened. She's my niece. She's my sister. That doesn't make either of us entitled to every detail. Tammy considered arguing, then placed her phone inside her bag. All right, she said again. Her apology restored nothing by itself. Returning access, correcting the inventory, and accepting limits began something smaller and more useful. Marissa refused Dylan's first 2 calls. On the 3rd day, she sent a message asking whether he still intended to interfere with the yard sale. He replied that he wanted to make an offer. They met in John's old office. The broker's folders had replaced most of the personal papers. Dust outlined the places where equipment cases had once stood. The wall clock had stopped. Marissa remained behind the desk. You already got the land, she said. I'm offering to buy the yard. With what? The easement funds. Her eyes narrowed. So this was the plan. There wasn't a plan. I didn't know the strip existed. You expect me to believe you spent $18,000 for a missing map without thinking there was money behind it? I thought there was a corrected boundary, and that happened to be worth $480,000. It happened to carry an offer and years of duties. Marissa opened the broker's appraisal. I'm not giving you a family price. I'm not asking for one. You'll pay the independent value? Yes, provided the buildings pass inspection and the archive stays protected. The archive is part of the yard. Then the sale agreement includes a permanent record access policy for proper survey use. You want Sophia here. I want her practice here if we agree on a lease. So she gets Dad's business. No, she has her own business. She gets workspace and lawful access to records. And what do you get? The yard. That's not an answer. Dylan looked through the office window. The van stood outside, running well enough now to make ordinary trips. The loft window still wore the loose plywood Marissa had asked him to fix. I get a place to keep the van, maintain the records, and do repair work, he said. I get a chance to make the yard useful again. You could buy a better building. Probably. Then why this one? Because I know what's broken here. Marissa looked at the stopped clock. You always did like broken things. The remark lacked the old force. She had seen what he did with them. Dylan placed a written offer on the desk. It matched the independent appraisal. It asked for the office, workshop, sheds, and loft, exactly as Marissa had inherited them. It included the archive policy and a normal inspection period. You have until the broker's deadline, he said. You're giving me a deadline now? I'm giving you a choice before I look elsewhere. He left her with the offer. Marissa accepted the following morning without calling him. The sale took several weeks. The inspection found roof leaks above the archive room, unsafe wiring in the loft, and a heater that needed replacement. Dylan didn't ask Marissa to repair everything. They adjusted the price according to the independent inspection and kept the transaction ordinary. At closing, she signed the final page and pushed the yard keys across the table. One is for the office, she said. One is the workshop. The small one opens the rear shed. Where's the loft key? It's on my ring. She removed it slowly. For years, keys had meant she was the person trusted with the real property, while Dylan was trusted with tools. Giving him that key cost her more than signing the deed. She placed it beside the others. I don't agree with how you handled all of this, she said. I know. You made me look like I was trying to take something that belonged to you. You tried to make the van records part of the yard, because Dad's work was in them, and because Landon wanted them. Marissa looked away. She wasn't ready to name the rest. Dylan didn't do it for her. If you need anything from the house, she said, call first. If you need anything from the archive, schedule it with Sophia or Tammy. My own father's archive? Yes. Her mouth tightened, but she nodded once. It wasn't closeness. It was the first boundary she accepted without trying to replace it with control. After closing, Dylan drove to 412 Copper Wash Road alone. He unlocked the gate, then returned to the van and brought it through. The yard was his now, but ownership didn't make it welcoming. The office was cold. The loft wiring remained unsafe. Wind moved the plywood over the broken window. The archive room smelled damp. Sophia arrived carrying a moisture meter and a lease draft. Tammy followed with labels, gloves, and the next 3 boxes. Dylan opened the workshop, set the keys on John's old bench, and unrolled the inspection list beneath the bare overhead bulbs. Sophia put one finger on the first item. "Archive roof," she said. "The loft wiring is dangerous. The archive is already wet. I'm sleeping in a rented room until the wiring is fixed. The field books don't have another room." Dylan looked through the open archive door. A brown stain spread across one ceiling tile. Beneath it, Tammy had moved 2 boxes onto plastic shelving. "Archive roof first," he said. Tammy wrote a number beside it. Then the window, then the loft wiring. "The window goes with the weatherproofing." "What about heat?" Sophia asked. "That comes after the electrician says the building won't burn down." "Good, you're learning." Dylan hired a licensed electrician for the loft and repaired the workshop systems himself. He replaced the archive room roof section before the next storm, sealed the window frames, and installed a dehumidifier beside the field books. Sophia checked the wall moisture every morning. On the 4th morning, the reading dropped into the safe range. "We can move the boxes back," she said. Tammy carried them one at a time. She logged each move, just as Dylan had required. Nothing disappeared into a cabinet because someone thought it belonged there. CW1 and CW2 remained in separate protective sleeves. The original second map stayed inside a fire-rated drawer. A working copy traveled with Sophia when she needed it. Every removal had a date, purpose, and return time. Tammy never complained about the log. She spent 3 afternoons a week cataloging John's files. Most contained ordinary work: road corners, fence disputes, utility notes, drainage measurements, and field calculations that mattered only when someone needed the line again. There were no more hidden properties. No larger surprise waited in another drawer. That made the work easier to trust. Sophia's lease took longer. She and Dylan sat in the cold office with the document between them. "You left the rent blank," he said. "I wanted to hear your number. I was going to give you the first year." "No. You lost access because you helped me, and you helped rebuild my field control. Not all of it. You're still helping. Free rent makes my practice feel borrowed." Dylan understood that. They agreed on a fair monthly amount, shared utilities, protected archive access, and separate locks for Sophia's client files. She controlled her practice. Dylan controlled the property. Neither could use family history to change the terms. Sophia signed first. "I want the front office," she said. "It has the leaking window. You fixed it. It still rattles." So did John. They moved her desks in the following week. The workshop became Dylan's repair space and the base for the van. He rebuilt the map cabinet runners, replaced the worn door seals, and added a mobile scanning table that folded against the wall. He didn't call himself a surveyor. He carried equipment, maintained field records, repaired tools, and operated the van under Sophia's direction on survey jobs. He also helped other qualified surveyors locate properly released records from John's archive. The first time the van returned to Copper Wash for paid work, Sophia sat in the passenger seat checking the day's measurements. "The headlight is still high," she said. "I adjusted it. You adjusted it higher. The road slopes. The road is not responsible for your headlight." Dylan parked near the improved crossing. Landon's crew had finished the drainage channel and reinforced the road surface. The visible track now followed the recorded easement route instead of drifting across the wash. Sophia checked both monuments. They remained undisturbed beneath protective covers. Dylan cleared windblown brush from the culvert and entered the work in the maintenance log. The easement account paid for materials, not his attention. That part remained his responsibility. The first real test came during an autumn storm. Rain fell hard against the loft windows through most of the night. At dawn, Landon called. "Water's moving across the lower crossing," he said. "The culvert is flowing, but brush is collecting at the upstream guard. Is the road open? For now, I'm coming. Dylan dressed, took the van, and called Sophia before leaving the yard. She met him at Copper Wash with field gear and dry clothes sealed in a plastic bag. Water ran brown through the channel. Landon had placed warning markers along the safe edge. Dylan fastened a line around his waist before approaching the debris guard. "You don't enter the water," Sophia said. "I'm not entering it. You're standing where it wants to be." He worked from the bank with a long rake. Landon pulled the brush clear as it came loose. They removed branches, wire, and a section of old fencing that had washed down from farther along the valley. The water level dropped several inches. A utility crew needed the road before noon. Dylan kept one lane clear while Landon's team spread fresh gravel at the soft edge. The utility truck passed without leaving the easement. By afternoon, the crossing was stable. Dylan photographed the drainage, logged the labor, and scheduled another inspection after the ground dried. Landon signed the entry. "John would have called twice before breakfast," he said. "He would have called you first so he could blame the project. He did that when it hadn't rained." The storm didn't turn Dylan into a hero. It gave him wet boots, a sore back, and a maintenance bill. It also proved that the duties written beneath the large payment were real. At the yard, the repaired roof held. The archive room remained dry. Water ran away from the workshop foundation, through the new drains Dylan had installed. He stood beneath the loft window and watched the last drops fall from the gutter. The place was no longer waiting for someone to save it. It was being maintained. Marissa tested the new boundaries twice. The first time, she arrived without calling and found the gate locked. She phoned Dylan from her car. "I need a box from Dad's archive," she said. "What box?" "Old house surveys." "For the house you inherited?" "Yes." "Schedule it with Sophia. She'll identify what you can copy." "I'm already here. I'm at Copper Wash. I still have my gate key." "No, you gave me every key at closing. I found another." Dylan became quiet. Marissa knew what he expected. She could use it, enter, and turn the visit into an argument about whether family needed permission. "I'll leave," she said. "Put the key through the office mail slot." Another silence followed. "All right." When Dylan returned, the spare key lay inside an envelope on the floor. Marissa had written her name across the front. She called 2 days later and requested an archive appointment. Sophia met her at the office. Tammy found the correct house survey and entered it in the access log. Marissa made a copy while the original stayed on the clean table. Before leaving, she looked through the workshop window at the restored van. "You kept the old lettering," she said. "It's part of the paint. You could make it look new. It isn't new." She nodded. The second test came when Marissa found 3 boxes of John's field papers in a closet at the house. Months earlier, she might have treated them as part of what she inherited or dropped them at the yard without explanation. This time, she called. "I found records," she said. "Can Tammy check them before I move anything?" "Yes, I can bring them Saturday. 10 in the morning, I'll be there." She arrived at 10 with every box still sealed as she had found it. Tammy opened them in the archive room, while Sophia checked the contents. Most were duplicate invoices and public map copies. One box held field books that completed gaps in the yard index. Nothing changed the Copper Wash ownership. Nothing offered Marissa a reason to reclaim the van. She helped place the books on the numbered shelves. "I should have checked that closet before the sale," she said. "Yes," Dylan replied. "You don't have to agree so quickly. You don't have to make every fact an argument," she almost answered. Then she picked up the next box. Their relationship didn't return to what it had been, because what they'd had depended on Dylan accepting the role she assigned him. They began something narrower. Marissa called before visiting. Dylan answered when he could. They met for supper at the loft once a month, with Tammy and Sophia usually present. If Marissa pushed past a boundary, Dylan ended the discussion without ending every future one. Tammy also had limits. She could work in the archive, but she didn't control it. She could remember John without using his memory as an instruction for everyone else. When probate finally closed, she handed Dylan the completed estate file and kept a copy of the archive policy rather than a key. "You were right to make me account for the drawer," she said. "You were right that records carry duties. That sounds almost friendly. It's accurate." She smiled and left the file on his desk. By winter, the loft had insulated walls, safe wiring, a small kitchen, and 2 rooms beneath the repaired roof. Dylan kept John's dented travel mug on a shelf beside the old brass key. Neither was hidden. Neither needed to explain anything. The yard operated 5 days a week. Sophia met clients in the front office. Tammy worked scheduled archive hours. Dylan repaired equipment in the workshop and drove the van on field days. Surveyors who needed John's records requested them through a clear process. Landon sent drainage reports after project inspections. Dylan walked the easement every month and after each serious storm. Emergency passage remained open. The money had purchased the yard, repaired the buildings, and created a maintenance reserve. It hadn't purchased belonging. The keys, logs, invoices, wet gloves, shared meals, and repeated choices had done that more slowly. If stories about young people rebuilding a life after family betrayal matter to you, subscribe and return for the next inheritance story. One evening, Dylan finished late beneath the van's open side door. He returned CW2 to its sleeve, locked the map drawer, and entered the time in the archive log. Above him, footsteps crossed the loft floor. Sophia had brought soup from town. Tammy was setting out bowls. Marissa had called before coming and arrived with bread, exactly when she said she would. Dylan switched off the workbench lamp. The stronger ceiling lights remained on, reflected in the clean windshield and the faded blue survey lettering. He checked the side doors, hung the brass key on its marked hook, and listened to the quiet building. Heat moved through the pipes. The archive room was dry. Wind touched the repaired window without making it rattle. Someone upstairs called that supper was getting cold. Dylan closed the workshop door, then paused at the foot of the loft stairs and looked back at Dylan's restored survey van beneath the warm workshop lights. While supper waited upstairs in the loft he now called home.